Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's meeting of the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee. Can I first introduce the top table? To my far left, we have Councillor Jack Welsh as the Vice Convener. Then we have Councillor Sheila McCall, also Vice Convener. To my immediate left here is Barbara Renton, the Executive Director of Communities. To my far right, Elaine Ritchie, the Lead of Housing. And to my immediate right here is Adam Taylor, who's Committee Services. Can I ask Adam to confirm any apologies received and do a roll call for the meeting, please?
Yep, thanks, Convener. Morning, members. We've had one apology this morning from Councillor Ian James, who has been substituted by Councillor John Duff. The majority of members are joining us here in the chamber, so I'll just quickly check the four who are online, whether they can actually hear us. Bailey Brock.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks.
I'm here.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Frampton.
Present.
And Bailey McLaren.
Yes, present.
So all members are present, Convener.
Thank you very much. Can I remind councillors who are online, you can get my attention by indicating in the chat box in the chamber. I'll take raised hands or chat box, whichever you prefer to do. I'll take questions in order. I'll take one question at a time from participants so that everybody can get a chance to participate in the debate. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect to the business of today's meeting? Not seeing anything. I'm just seeing people saying good morning to each other so far. We can move on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any questions regarding those minutes, or can we agree those minutes? Okay, thank you very much. Outstanding business statement, item 4. Can I ask if there are any questions related to the outstanding business statement? Therefore, can we note the outstanding business statement and agree to move any actions that are now completed? Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5, which is a presentation tackling antisocial behaviour in partnership. I'll hand over to Sergeant Lee Stewart, Sandy Robertson and Station Commander Cammy Sands from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, who will jointly deliver a presentation to us this morning. Thank you.
Good morning all. Sandy, are you able to access the slides and share?
Yeah.
Can you confirm, is that coming through?
Yes, it's coming through, thank you.
Morning all. Yeah, my name's Lee Stewart. I'm a sergeant with Police Scotland in the Partnerships, Interventions and Preventions team based in St Martin's House alongside the Safer Communities team. Sandy, do you want to introduce yourself?
So Sandy Robertson, Safer Communities Officer. As Lee says, co-located here at St Martin's House along with Criminal Justice, Police Scotland, covering a wide range of community safety issues.
And Cammy? Well, I saw Cammy earlier on. Cammy Sands, who's based with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. I don't know if you can come in, Cammy.
I think you're on mute, Cammy, which is why we didn't hear you.
There we go, that's me now. Yes, good morning all. My name is Campbell Sands. I am the Station Commander for Preventions and Protections for the Tayside area, and I also look after Kirriemuir and Forfar fire stations.
Yeah, so today we're basically going to provide you an overview of how we tackle antisocial behaviour in partnership within Perth and Kinross. So just to start, it's basically going over what we are talking about when we talk about antisocial behaviour. So that's basically the definition that we're working to there that you'll all be able to read. So it's any behaviour that causes or is likely to cause harassment, alarm, distress to any person. Can also be described as a range of unacceptable activity that causes harm to the community or the environment. This can include, but not limited to, noise nuisance, verbal abuse, threatened behaviour, harassment, vandalism, fire setting, use of vehicles, can take place in private or public, and also includes things like fly tipping as well. So for this time of the year, seasonally, we have the issues potentially around Halloween with egg throwing, etc., and also bonfire night, and we'll come along and talk about Moonbeam, Operation Moonbeam, later on in the presentation. One of the things about antisocial behaviour as well, it's pretty vague in what the levels are for criminality, and how we deal with individual instances of antisocial behaviour, and how we sort of collate and compile information together to form a course of conduct which allows other interventions, which I'll talk about later as well. And as with anything in Perth and Kinross, we like to take a holistic approach and a partnership approach to how we deal with antisocial behaviour locally. So in this slide, I'll just talk about the sort of partnership that we have here. So initially, it's the Perth and Kinross Antisocial Behaviour Strategy, which is in one of the following slides, and Sandy will talk about that. We've also got a number of locality-based ASB partnership tasking meetings. So there's 5 of those across the Perth and Kinross, with colleagues from Safer Communities team, housing, police, child protection, waste management, IDART, which is the Integrated Drugs and Alcohol team, and we all meet together to ensure that there's a joined up approach in tackling antisocial behaviour, amongst other things. The 5 localities are Letham, Tulloch, Fairfield and Bertha Park, Perth City and Scone, Highland Perthshire, Blairgowrie and East Perthshire, and South Perthshire and Kinrossshire as well. We've got a number of co-located services across the area as well. As I mentioned in the introductions, me and my team of officers are based in St Martin's House, along with the Safer Communities team. So it's myself and 2 officers. We also have a civilian member of staff who is her post is funded through Perth and Kinross Council, and she's solely dedicated to proactively sharing information between the agencies in relation to antisocial behaviour. We also have within the partnership co-location at the fire station, where fire services are co-located with the community wardens. Also, talking about the planned and flexible approach. So later in the presentation, we'll speak about some of the planned things such as Operation Moonbeam, but we also have a flexible approach where we look at sharing information, early interventions, which can be carried out, such as identifying hotspots, problematic addresses and people, and directing patrols, whether that be from police and community teams, community wardens. We can also offer sort of leafleting, gather information by speaking to members of the public, and basically fill in the picture to let us understand what's going on. We operate with a no wrong door approach, and would say that also includes local elected members. I know in the sort of pre-meeting we were asked about the trouble that some people feel they have, feeling that they're not listened to, and there can sometimes be that kind of scattergun approach of members of the public reporting issues. So what I'd stress today is that with the no wrong door approach, that we obviously look to get information in, whether it's a touch point with the police or any of the other partner agencies or even elected members. If you are hearing about issues that people are raising with yourself, it's about knowing how to funnel that back into the partnership so we can look at that together, piece together the information that we have, because it may be reporting from more than one agency is getting reports, and it's about bringing that together and forming the full picture, so that we can provide those interventions. We're currently using returns from a survey, it's your survey, as an additional means of capturing concerns, and we'll be publishing some of the "you said we did" messages in the coming weeks. We're also contactable through our community policing team mailboxes, which will be circulated following the meeting. And we've featured communications published by our identified community officers. So that was work that was done in line with the SPA. the Scottish Police Authority looking at Letham as a locality. There's a lot of work that we're also featuring in the police and local authority into looking at the partnership model across and the locality model across the county, basically, to have focus on what the issues are in these areas and working together to solve them. I'll just pass on to Sandy that'll talk about the Perth and Kinross ESB strategy.
Yeah, so September of last year, we met with fellow kind of partners, including housing, legal services, Turning Point Scotland, which is you'll probably know as a third sector supporting agency, victim support, legal, so I've mentioned legal services before, Scottish Fire and Rescue, and Police Scotland, and we had Lee was present to represent the partnership and preventions, and also Dave Summers, who's the sergeant for the community side of policing, basically to talk through our strategy, which, as you see, looks like this. It was a lady called Claire Mills, who's very good at giving that visual approach, which we found it a lot easier to read. I know it looks a bit tight there because of the slides, but it's a lot easier to read than possibly a normal 20-30 page document about our approach. When we got that to kind of a draft section, we then invited in some of our victims of antisocial behaviour for some of our really chronic, long-term and problematic cases, to get them to have a look at it, have a discuss about things where we could have improved, and it was a really good session, as was the session with our partners. Very good at creating all this. It was a partnership approach to look at all the key things in there, likes of education, vulnerable people, the visitor management, which we'll talk about later on, preventative stuff, road safety, all these things that we're involved in, what our next steps were to progress these, and also what our priorities would be for us to look at. And once we had their input, we were able to finalise this, which we've kind of circulated amongst our partners and available to anyone who would like to see it. Along with that, we basically created a pledge of what we as a partnership, not just the Safer Community team, but the Perth and Kinross Council and wider partners would do. So basically the pledges were that we would collectively do our best. We'll keep in touch. We'll tell you, the customer, what we can, because we feel that's important, because a lot of the times they feel like they're in the dark, what's happening. We will work with others. We use all the resources available to us, acknowledge our mistakes, because we know we don't get it right all the time, but we do look and see where we can make learning from that. Also learn from our successes, and I think the most important thing which came across with the people who had been victims of these chronic cases was that we will stick at it. We won't, when we came across hurdles where we were thinking we can't get this over the line, but we know there's an issue, we kept at it and didn't give up, if you like. So that's the strategy as it looks now, and that's our approach to antisocial behaviour and partnership working.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so some of the sort of interventions and initiatives that we have available and that we utilise, I'll just cover a few topics, and I know that Cammie's going to cover visitor management and Moonbeam, so I'll talk about youth-related antisocial behaviour. So that was covered sort of in the initial definition of it, can happen sort of anywhere, and one of the issues that we had coming out of COVID was numbers of youths basically gathering mainly on the inches, but also within the town centres and other identified hotspots. And it was a real collective approach that we had in relation to tackling that, basically having that engagement piece with the young people, to listen to them, understand the issues and what they were going through, and through that shared understanding, try to divert some of the issues away, root out where there were chronic issues and individuals that we could deal with robustly, but really giving people the benefit of the doubt and listening to them, because there were young people who were going through unprecedented times really, and it was a real part of their youth and development that was impinged on, and this was sort of a response to that, was gathering en masse in several locations. So we had a working group that set up. The police part of it was Operation Stung, and it also worked into our nighttime economy centre safe, but it was about bringing the partners together and having that collective approach where we could find the right agency to tackle the right behaviour and speak to the people to get that level of engagement to get the understanding. So there's a youth engagement team that we met with them weekly at St Martin's House, along with the community wardens, street pastors, the YMCA, and obviously myself from the police. We also had an aspect of that fed into the schools to work with education, and also there was outreach provided to families as well to visit people within their home address and follow up with that. And off the back of that, I don't know if it's through these interventions or it might be a return to normality following COVID, but there was a real reduction in the numbers that were gathering, and the hotspots were really isolated down to a few places where we could really focus the resources that we had on there and continue with that engagement with the young people to understand how we could sort of change that behaviour and work with them to do so. Another part is antisocial behaviour orders. So I know that antisocial behaviour within sort of private houses is a massive thing for people, and it goes back to what Sandy was talking about with the pledge there. It's listening to people, making them feel that we are listening to them, understanding what their problems are, and understanding the impact that what can be seen if you're only finding out about it on the odd occasion can see pretty trivial from the outside, but it's sort of the most important thing that are going on in some people's lives is being able to live in peace and quiet, and that's ultimately what we want for everyone. So as with the other elements of antisocial, it's a real partnership approach in relation to how we go about antisocial behaviour within a private dwelling. So within the Safer Communities team, they've got 2 officers that are dedicated to monitoring noise within premises through the Noise app. So one of them's based for council tenancies, and other ones for the other agencies that provide housing in the area. So we're flexible as well. We can listen. We've got that aspect of proactive sharing. So if we've got a list of addresses that are problems or areas that we know about, we can proactively share information between the agencies. And then we've got officers who are basically dedicated to monitoring certain tenancies or properties or individuals, so they have the capacity to escalate that. Let's pull a meeting together, speak about that, see what sort of interventions we can have, starting from low level ones. So it could be just basically a joint visit from police or a housing officer that can go to and speak to the parties involved. We can think about mediation between parties, but we can also escalate that up to acceptable behaviour agreements, and obviously compiling information, applying for and looking to get an antisocial behaviour order. And if that's either on an interim or a full ASBO on an address or an individual, we can escalate that to enforcement should that be breached. There's currently 5 antisocial behaviour orders in Perth and Kinross that are live at the moment, and from some of the antisocial behaviour orders that we've had granted recently, we can see a real improvement in behaviour, because it's unfortunately the case that some individuals only really get the message about their antisocial offending when it's resulted in them being brought into police custody and charged with offences, unfortunately. But on a lot of other occasions, some of the lower level interventions, whether that be patrols, leafleting, or just speaking to people and trying to work out the issues, can make real inroads in sort of changing behaviours and sharing that understanding. Visitor management and Moonbeam are also on the slides, and I'm going to pass over to Cami now, who's going to provide his part of the presentation. And Cami, just give me a shout when you want me to move the slides forward.
Thanks, Lee and Sandy. Good morning, members. Lee's given you and Sandy have given you a very good overview there of how the partnership works and how we would share information with regards to antisocial behaviour. I'm going to concentrate more on some of the good examples that the partnership are involved in and that the Fire and Rescue Service would lead on. So the first slide that's come up here will show you about some of the youth engagement that's carried out around the Perth and Kinross area from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. The schools intervention through the seasonal sessions. I'll cover Op Moonbeam and where we go in the next slide, but to give you an overview, we'll have the sessions broken down into spring. So the spring thematic action plan would cover things along the lines of wildfires and the congregation of people, and that's the sort of information we'd be looking to get over. We've also added water safety into all 4 taps now, so everybody's aware of what's going on. Excuse me. Apologies for interruption. We had an ongoing telecoms over the tannoy there in the fire station. So yeah, with regards to the thematic action plans, we will lead in on as much information as we possibly can. We will make schools interventions, operational staff will be tasked with presentations, with technical input and practical input that we would deliver into the schools. Again, not just schools, it can be done around groups, so Cubs, Scouts, Cadets, etc. They would all make arrangements with the Fire and Rescue Service if this was something that was required. In the Blairgowrie area recently, just over the October holidays there, they carried out a blue light holiday camp. So it was the police service, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, ambulance, including SORT, and they gave an overview of the services, again recruitment, but also the main messages that we were looking to get over at that time, and it allowed all our partners to come in here and to deliver to a group of people who were requiring that information. Working with the schools needn't necessarily be deemed to be those that are non-engaging. We've had areas now where we've had social media issues with regards to TikTok challenges that have created concerns within schools. We've looked at things like malicious activations, smoking and vaping, using deodorants, and also fires within schools. The teachers themselves can then make direct contact with ourselves, and we could look at a programme of works to work with individuals or to work with groups to ensure that they're getting an understanding of the risks involved. Some people, as I say, might be those that are of the non-engaging source, and we could perhaps offer them a life skills course which will give them development, team building, looking at giving them resilience, also some form of leadership. So it will give them that kind of responsibility aspect as to where they are. The fire skills sessions will involve individuals working alongside the community action teams and our operational staff, as I've said, and we'll look to ensure that the respect issues are highlighted and taken over. With regards to FSSE, or the Fire Safety Support and Education, some people within the meeting today might have remembered that as being the fire setters courses that we used to run with the Fire and Rescue Service. So we've rebranded that to FSSE now. Again, we'll take referrals for children and young people who are engaged or have engaged in fire-related antisocial behaviour, or those with a fascination of fire or fire-setting behaviours. The referral would be raised with the partner agency and will come through the Fire and Rescue Service, and we would take it through our FSSE policy to ensure that we were engaging with that individual. Again, this could come from a nursery school aged child up to the age of 16. Excuse me for 2 seconds. I apologise. Yeah, with regards to FSSE, we will work with nursery school children right up to the age of 16. We'll look at habits, we'll look at lifestyle, and we'll try to encourage people to understand the responsibilities and the consequences of fire setting, fire starting, and the behaviours involved with that. So yeah, that's just a quick overview of some of the youth engagement that we've done. Lee, if I can get you to move it on. So Op Moonbeam, nationally, Op Moonbeam is launched in the build-up to Bonfire Night. Within the Perth and Kinross area, the partnership come together, usually led by Sandy's team, myself, and our police colleagues, where we'll start to put information together with regards to the build-up. We will also speak with, the contact this time was Janet Ray within Trading Standards. So we'll letter the distributors of fireworks, and we'll also make sure that Scottish Fire and Rescue Service fireworks leaflets are handed out with all sales. We will look around the commercial premises within the Perth and Kinross area, and we will leaflet or letter them with regards to the surrounding areas, whether there's needing tidied up. So we're looking to prevent any secondary fire opportunities occurring. As we build up towards the 5th of November, the event planning will take place. Sandy will put together his team will understand which wardens will be on duty during the day and at night. We'll pass on details with the Fire and Rescue Service to ensure that the day shift and the night shift officers in charge are contactable, direct. In the build-up, we'll also look then to sharing information. Fire and Rescue, we'll look at any trends with regards to secondary fires or malicious activations, etc. We'll pass that on to our police colleagues. At that point, we can then look to put some patrols together, evidence-based obviously, or intelligence-led, and we'll ensure that all the intelligence is passed around the partner agencies to ensure that we are targeting the right areas with the right resources at the right time. Moonbeam is obviously there, as you can see from the photos, to take away from the pictures and to reduce the sort of antisocial behaviour with regards to fireworks and bonfires. I won't go into it in too much detail. I think the pictures kind of explain it, and I'm sure from what Lee's explained already with regards to the information that's passing between the partnerships and the understanding now that we've got the event plans in place leading up to Bonfire Night, you'll appreciate that there's a lot of work put into this. Cheers, Lee. If you go on to the next one. So, visitor management, 2018. I think Roddy Ross, who's on the call, and I both had a couple of conversations about things that were happening, and when we reached the COVID lockdown, the escalation in antisocial behaviour, what was initially classed as being dirty camping, as you can see from the photos with regards to the refuse that was left behind from the camping opportunities, and what is, I would have to say, probably some of the most beautiful landscapes across Scotland, and that's what we were being left with. Concerns were raised within Kinlochranach, Foss Road and Clooney Loch in the first instance, and after an initial scoping session, we put our heads together really quite tightly on this one and thought, right, how many partner agencies are involved in this? Who can we bring into it? We obviously knew that the police were involved with regards to some enforcement side of stuff. The Fire and Rescue Service were involved with what we can see on the screen with regards to the fires, etc., that were left behind, and the wildfire concerns that we would have at that time. But there was far more to it. I think when I look back from day one when we started to where we are now, the amount of partners that are involved in this, whether it be forestry and land, the environmental services, all the services involved through Perth and Kinross Council, be that parking attendants, green spaces, we've all come together in collaboration to deliver on probably what is deemed as best practice now through Scottish Government for dealing with the visitor management issues. This sat at Scottish Government level, so we do know how far this moved on, and we know the involvement that the partnership have had to deliver on this. Very, very successful. It also included Roddy's team becoming larger with the visitor management, the visitor rangers being introduced into the team also, to allow us to have some form of scope and responsibility and concern over this. Looking at it, it's ongoing. It stands up usually about February in the year. We'll start to bring the partners in, we'll raise our concerns, and I think one of the things that we really took out of this was listening to the landowners and also the communities. So we've got the community groups involved in this now, so we are getting real terms, local needs, and on the ground we can deliver on that. So yeah, without further ado, I'll finish off there and I'll pass this back to Lee to mop up and we can finish the presentation.
Yeah, so just to complete there, I've got details of how to report antisocial behaviour. But going back to what I touched on earlier with the no wrong door sort of policy, basically we can get information in from anyone, and I would say if anyone's having members of the public reporting issues regarding antisocial behaviour or anything else, then it's having those channels to feed that information in. So as you can see there, there's the non-emergency contact us, also the CPT mailboxes which will be distributed following the meeting, and the touch points there from the partners within the community, local housing officer, wardens, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Basically any sort of touch point that are having with a professional or third sector body, that can come back into us and help us start sort of looking, assessing what's there and thinking how we can help people. The main thing is obviously allowing people to feel listened to, and that we're able to do something, and when we're not able to do something immediately, explaining why that is. That goes back to the promise again. So that's really it, unless Sandy or Cammy, have you got anything else that you want to add?
No, I think it pretty much covered it. It shows the example of the partnership work, and that some of you guys will know all about, some less so. I suppose it really depends on what comes through your door as a councillor. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers our approach.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So that was Lee, Cammy and Sandy. That was a great presentation you've given us there. Now we're open to questions, and we've already got some eager councillors in with their questions already, so I'll go first to Bailey Ahern.
Thanks very much, convener, and thanks guys for the presentation. And as chair of the Community Justice and Safety Partnership, I can wholly support the work that's done in Perth and Kinross as a partnership. You discussed very briefly there about the work that's been done with the young people, especially in the city centre, and the groups that used to hang about and cause problems there, and the work that's been done to scatter them and move them on. But we're talking mainly about those that are in secondary school and have just left. The issue that we tend to see now, certainly in some areas of the city centre, are pupils of P5 to P7 age. And I've been with wardens when I've seen them interact with these kids, and I would not repeat in here some of the language and behaviour that has been put back towards the wardens, and it's totally unacceptable. And I just wonder the work that's been done with this age group of kids, and whether there is thoughts of involving the parents and taking actions against the parents in not looking after and controlling the children of this age. And I don't know what work has been done in the primary schools.
So there's a chance. YMCA, we met with them yesterday as part of our regular meetings with our partners. The YMCA are going to be delivering a 6-month project to Riverside School, which involves P6s and P7s to tackle some of the behaviour issues that you talk about. Other things to get involved in schools. It's one of the things that we're trying to get back with our community wardens to set up our junior wardens. So we're looking to get back into schools and working with them. Probably appreciate that we sometimes have fluctuations in our numbers of community wardens due to recruitment and people moving on. Usually with our well wishes, because they're usually moving on either in either council positions or going to police or fire and rescue. So we have an evolving door of community wardens, but we are trying to develop more into delivery into schools, which involves primary schools as much as secondary.
From a police point of view, so we've got dedicated patrols for key times and evenings at the weekends when there's a lot of kids that age that are gathering in the town centre, etc. And we're working together with partners, so there'll be joint patrols with community wardens or street pastors. There's a sharing of information. We have weekly sort of debriefs. So it's our Inspector Steve Gray goes along to meet with partners to follow up and collate names of. So if we've got high hitters of people that are constantly involved in that, then that's something that we would review, and then there would potentially be follow-ups with the family to let them know. But ultimately, if there's children who are out of order, who are traced by police at the time, officers should be taking them home to their parents. If they're not able to keep themselves safe, or they're putting themselves or others in danger, then they'd be getting taken home and explain to their parents why we're intervening, or we'd be making contact with the parents to come and collect them.
And we do that also as a joint working thing. The North Muirton area before the summer, some the names that were coming to attention, they were visited by the wardens and police. Not all visits were met with encouraging signs back from the parents, but the main thing is that the people are being challenged about this. I think one of the things we talk about when we talk about the partnership and our approaches is to make people not invisible, so that we know who they are. Our people know who they are. And we do have good education. We can go to schools. We've shared photos with schools to try and identify who are causing issues, and the school can then approach the children as well, just to again show that they're not invisible in what they're doing. It's not just their behaviour in the school. It's not, the school's not one side of things and the community's another. It's the whole picture in our community. So the schools are very much a part of our community as much as the play parks and the high street, etc.
Thank you.
Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I've got a few questions, but I'll come back around the system. Thanks very much for the presentation, guys. Just one thing that jumped straight out at me, we seem to have an awful lot of people in the partnership, but the one service that seems to be missing is the ambulance service, and I wondered if there was a reason for the ambulance service not being part of it.
I can answer that if you want. I can answer that if you want, Sandy. Yeah. We've actually done an internal review on that, and I know my boss, Group Commander Kabamba's sitting in on this, and we're aware that we need to do a little bit more work with the ambulance service to integrate them into what we're doing, and that's ongoing. So yeah, it was good that that point's been picked up, but we have picked it up ourselves in our kind of feedback.
Maybe it's a wee bit remiss of me from leaving it off the slides there. We do have daily contact with ambulance, my team do, in relation to non-fatal overdose. So I attend the group daily that meets with partner agencies looking at anyone that's had a non-fatal overdose within Perth and Kinross over the last 24 hours. SAS are part of that discussion, and they share information with any calls that they've attended. Likewise, we and other agencies, and then we pick up and get that outreach out to people straight away or as soon as we can through third sector or core agencies. So we have that, but I appreciate what you're saying in relation to sort of other aspects of ASB as maybe needing looked at.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thanks again for the presentation, guys. Maybe I should start off with Sandy saying fit like, because you'll understand that. My question is that walking regularly around my village where I live, I am repeatedly asked about antisocial behaviour and why, for instance, people are brought into the village with a known history, upsetting everybody and the balance. People are at me all the time about it, and when you've had a wee village and you've had a wee corner where everything has been lovely and settled, and then suddenly you get someone brought in who causes havoc. And I have approached the housing team, and I have to say Elaine and her team are first class. It's these people's behaviour, but it's a question of they're asking me is, why are you putting these people out there in the first place? So that would be a question, I think, to the housing people. But for the antisocial guys, how much do you monitor, and is it up to somebody like me to tell you? Because obviously the police about it a few times. Do they tell you? So thank you.
So I think the word why they put somewhere is probably not quite right. When someone applies for housing, they have the right to kind of choose what areas that they would like to live in. And a lot of the times with housing, it comes down to what their needs are and what is available at that time. Another thing that has been introduced, the Scottish Government, was I think it's a suspension of local connection. So previously, if say someone, perhaps like myself, I mean, if I was coming down from Murray to live in Perth and Kinross and applying for housing, if you go back a few years, I would be told to go back to the area that I come from, because I don't actually have a local connection. We talk about local connections, we're talking about immediate family members. Other local connections when it doesn't apply is likes of someone who's been in the armed forces, so they can apply to pretty much any local authority and get in. With the Scottish Government suspending the local connection thing, it means that anybody from anywhere can apply to Perth and Kinross or anywhere else in Scotland and look for housing. When someone does apply for housing, and that they're from out with, our housing colleagues would get in touch with ourselves if they come in for temporary housing. So if they've presented as homeless and looking for accommodation, they complete a form at housing which goes to Lee's team for them to start carrying out checks, and our checks that we'll carry out in our team to identify any risks, etc., that person brings. Depending on the level of risk, then it depends on what we can collectively look at within the parameters of the housing thing, trying to house them appropriately. When it comes to flagging up things, I think the more voices flagging up issues to the right people, to ourselves, and obviously to the police, will mean that we can have a better understanding of what's going on. I think some of the assumptions are that we know everything, and sometimes we don't. And we do get that from a lot of people who complain that they when we speak to someone who's been a victim of antisocial behaviour or witnessing it, they've always thought that someone else would make the call, and they have kind of told us about it, a couple of weeks, a couple of months later, that they've been witnessing that, but just thought they can't believe that someone's not reported this to us. So I don't know if that maybe answers it, but what I would say is if you're getting the issues, please come and tell us, and then we'll look at it. We're maybe already involved or we're maybe unaware, but the earlier we get to know about the issues, the easier it can make our lives for dealing with it.
Thanks, Andy. And Richard would like to also answer that question for you.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just to reiterate, it's rare that we would actually place MD in a place where they've got no support networks. It's rare cases, and as you said, it's 1 or 2 cases. And when that does happen, we do work in a partnership with the warden service and make sure housing officers are out to get a package of support to support that community. I understand where Sandy's coming from, local connection. That is not a major issue for us. We're talking small numbers, so please don't be alarmed because of the suspension of local connection. We've not seen a major issue in terms of people moving to Perth and Kinross because of that suspension. It's sometimes people choose areas because of desperation and they want to get away from it, but it's rare cases that we have that. But I do appreciate that does happen in your ward areas, and it could be 1 or 2 cases, but we need to work in partnership together. And Councillor Smith, I'll take that case up with you after today's meeting. Thank you.
The main reason was that some of the people involved, and it can also be hearsay and all that, but they were cheered out of a certain area because they were going, and then we end up with them. That's the problem people are fighting about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I've just been reminded that when we do discuss things on this committee in the public forum, that we do our best to make sure we don't identify people as individuals, because we're here to talk in the generality. Obviously, we all have experience in individual cases that are in our heads, but please speak in general. Councillor Broad.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Convener and I cover the same ward, and I'm going to be general. We've had some serious vandalism this year, vandalising a care home, hotel, both empty. Stones being thrown at people's windows, eggs being thrown at people's houses, usually elderly people. even on Monday, when I was sitting on the local review body, we had a planning appeal involving vandalism of a church itself in Stanley. I'm just wondering, you touched on this very briefly in the earlier question. Could you walk us through, assuming one of these teenagers, some of them are primary school, if they're actually caught by the police, could you walk us through what actually happens? What's the procedure when you've caught somebody in the act of vandalising on the premises? What happens next?
Well, if we have sufficiency to say that someone, if it was an adult, would be charged with that offence, then we would submit a vulnerable persons report. We would do the same thing as what we would with registering a crime report, but our youth justice assessor would look at that, and the officer that was in charge of the case would be tasked with going and visiting the young person with their family and obtaining antecedent details. So we'd be looking at their backgrounds. What are they like in school? Do they have any hobbies and interests? Do we think that basically looking at GIRFEC, really getting it right for them, and the Shinari indicators to make sure that they're supported, healthy, safe, etc. That would be assessed by our youth justice assessor, who would also look at anything that they've done in the past, and then say, right, okay, what do we have at our disposal here? Can we do a restorative warning? Do they have to be reported to the children's reporter for that? And then it would be escalated by sort of the children's reporter, or we would have a restorative warning where the child and the parent would be brought into the police station. They'd be spoken about how they think that their behaviour impacts themselves, what impact it has on the victim, what impact it has on their parents having to hear that and have the police attend the address, etc. And there would only really be one case where they would be suitable for a restorative warning before it would be escalated further. But on the back of that, if there are sort of thematic issues in areas, we've got community teams that are based locally, there's community sergeants that are based in the north that should have a good grasp on what's happening locally. And again, it's just getting round the table, speaking with agencies, and then finding the interventions and the approaches that can tackle that effectively. But with the best will in the world, sometimes we get people who are young, who have committed offences, and it's basically process-led after we've got sufficient evidence to say they were responsible for that crime. And obviously young people need to be supported, given their age. Their brain's not sort of fully formed to adults, so it's understanding where these behaviours are coming from and trying to provide that support to prevent them from happening in the future. But if we were having concerns from that restorative warning where mum or dad or guardian's attitude was terrible, then that's obviously, we can, through the VPD process, we can share that with social work and flag that to other partners to get further interventions if required. Does that cover that, or were you looking at sort of how we tackle vandalisms at schools or churches, etc.?
I'll come back with another question a bit later if I may. Thanks. But that's fine for the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes, so your second question.
Yeah, thanks, convener. You mentioned ASBOs earlier on, and there's only 5, which I'm lucky in my ward, which is Carsgary. I don't really have a lot of antisocial behaviour, so I apologise, I don't have a lot of experiences, but 5 instinctively seems to me to be quite low. But then you did say that you saw a huge improvement after an ASBO had been issued. So I'm wondering, is 5 high or low in your world? And is there a reason, if it is low, is there a reason that there's so few of them?
I could take it. Yeah, well, for comparison, there are currently no ASBOs in Angus, and I think they've got 180 in Dundee. So we're not quite in the middle of that, but it's on a case-by-case basis, where first of all, the threshold to get an antisocial behaviour order is granted, it's got to go through a legal process. There needs to be the willingness to actually put these things through. So from our point, we would collate all the information, make an application, that would go to legal services, then ultimately it would be up to legal to decide whether or not they think they've got a case or not, present that, then you would get an interim antisocial behaviour order. They normally are granted on an interim basis in the first instance, then it can be sort of 12 to 18 months. So what you can have is you can have an ASBO on an address, or it can be in an individual, and even if they move anywhere within Perth and Kinross, it would still be on that person, so it would follow them if their moved address is. What I would say is that sometimes we make antisocial behaviour order applications and they don't quite meet the threshold, so we're coming back. But it's a difficult one because if behaviour improves, we have to be able to evidence that we've tried all interventions, everything's failed, there's a current issue that's ongoing. So say someone maybe gets a prison sentence in between, so there's a month or two sort of lull in things being reported and things happening, then that would essentially you're starting from scratch again when the person returns to that address. So it's a tricky one, but since I've been in post in here for about 18 months, we've had a keen sort of look at antisocial. I've changed the processes in here. We had the sort of collation of the reports going out to the community teams, but I've brought that into my team, so we've got that direct contact with the Safer Communities officer who's going to be making the application. So we've tightened up on sort of quick time, because I don't want any delays in us putting these reports or applications in, so that we've got the best possible opportunity to have them granted. So 5 is probably about right, because what we do is each case is individual, and we probably wouldn't get antisocial behaviour orders granted for a lot of the issues because they just wouldn't meet that threshold. So anywhere where we do feel there's a good chance of getting one, we'll actively pursue some, and if they don't meet the bar, we'll keep that under constant review and come back again if we feel there's still a case there for one.
And I think to add on to that is going back to the pledge that we'll stick at it just because it doesn't meet the threshold for legal, to take it to court to secure an ASBO. We go back and see what else we can do to provide the information to legal. So it may be that we carry out like some letter drops, which we would have done previously to looking to get the antisocial behaviour order, but we would maybe look to do another one and another one. Chap the doors of people who live near to this issue to see if we can gather that information. So again, it's that stick at it approach, because if we've submitted the papers to legal because we think there's enough for an ASBO, as we think there is, we know that there's an issue that needs to be tackled, so we don't walk away.
Thank you. Councillor McCall, your first question.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. I suppose my question really is around how do you know that people feel listened to? Because my casework on this type of subject is very much that people phone the police if they feel that sometimes, as Frank, Councillor Smith has said, new neighbours move in and they cause a disturbance either through noise, particularly during the night. They might behave in a aggressive manner towards their neighbours, and the constituents that contact me say that they phone the police and the police come out and say, well, we've no evidence, and then they walk away. There might be a different police officer that calls the next time, and they don't feel listened to. So how do you, what's your closed loop there to ensure that people who do feel that they have neighbours who are behaving in an antisocial way, how do you give them the sense that they are being listened to and that their concerns are being taken forward? Thank you.
Input from people who were experiencing antisocial behaviour formed part of the strategy. So one part would be pointing to that, to saying we're actively listening to you and taking on board to shape how we do things going forward. Another part of that is it may be a different officer who's dealing with something at 3 in the morning, say, but we're picking that up the next day, actively sharing that with partners, and there'll be a specific point of contact within the Safer Communities team who would be collating that, engaging with the people, and if they are going for, say, an antisocial behaviour order, taking a witness statement from them to say how much that behaviour is impacting them. So there's that collated approach. It may be a case of if you're having constituents that are saying they don't feel listened to, flagging that up as well, because we're always learning, and if there's areas of improvement where someone's had not the best interaction with the police, then we'd be keen to know about that and share learning that came from that and do as best as we can. And maybe it's that joined up bit of trying to deal with the incident that's presenting. And as I said before, sometimes meeting the criminality threshold can be quite not there when you're dealing with things in an isolated incident, a one-off where an officer doesn't have knowledge of that. But certainly there's a joined up process that goes on in the back, and we are listening to people and keen to work with them. We've got the Noise app that obviously people can download, and that can feed directly into the team here at the Safer Communities team, and other things. So yeah, if there are issues, please feel free to once the community mailboxes are circulated, or even getting in touch with myself, and we can have a review of cases, because I totally understand that it's horrible for people to feel that they're living with unacceptable behaviour that they can't do anything about, and if they're feeling helpless and that services aren't helping them, then that must be horrible for people. So yeah, we're happy to follow up on cases where people don't feel they've got the best service, but there are catch-alls and that we are sharing the information, and there's named officers that will be getting in contact with people to follow up on their concerns.
I think part of it also is sometimes we'll get people who will phone up to tell us about an issue, and we'll give it the appropriate advice because it's the first time we're hearing about it, and that advice is generally that they need to report issues as and when they're happening. But then we might not hear again from that person to about 3-4 months down the line. And bear in mind, we only had one contact with them, or maybe 1 or 2 contacts on before, and then they say that nothing's improved, but they haven't reported anything, because what's the point? And we try to encourage people, look, you must report things, and we try to explain the process to them, that we need that evidence coming in, that behaviour that's happening. So some of the things that we would do, as said, we do letter drops. We would maybe chap the doors in more problematic cases, or if we're looking for a general feel of how the area is, we can advise them of what's called the Noise app, which is an app that goes onto the phone. It's just recently been upgraded, that now would accept video footage as well, so we can get video footage as well of behaviours, as well as noise recordings, and they get sent direct to ourselves as and when someone hits the button after they've recorded the event. Other things we can do is look to victim support, either to support someone who's going through a bit of a torrid time, and needs someone, an impartial ear to speak to. But also through the victim support, we can tap into funding that they've got, where they have Ring doorbells, which are great footage for antisocial behaviour, and also gives people that peace of mind as well, that they've got something that they can rely on.
Sorry, thank you both, and Leah, will contact you definitely, because there are often low-level repeat behaviours that doesn't necessarily reach criminality. And I also am aware that sometimes it's perceived antisocial behaviour, and it's just different lifestyles, and generational issues are there too. But I'm interested particularly, Sandy, in the apps that you've suggested. So I wasn't aware of some of those, so I think that's really useful to have. So we need to think about some way perhaps how we can circulate that information more, particularly among elected members, so we know how we can feed back to our constituents on those matters. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Really,
Thank you very much. On Monday evening, I had cause to phone 101 because there was a group of youths outside in the car park outside where I live on dirt bikes without hats, helmets on, no lights on, driving in amongst cars, pavements, and on the roads in the dark. When I got through to 101, I was told I had a 15-minute wait, so I just hung up and just monitored it. It wasn't at the threshold I thought I needed to dial 999, and even if I had done in the past, I've not had a response to 999, and I don't know whether that's down to police numbers we have now. I just wonder how is the 101 service going to improve, and am I similar to a lot of others that because you've had a long wait, when you get through to 101, they've hung up and we're not getting crimes reported because they don't know of another route, i.e. emailing their local community justice partnerships or other numbers or other organisations where they can report it. So if you could answer about the 101 service and whether you think that's going to improve, or how do we improve it, and then get advice out about other routes for reporting low-level crime.
Yeah, it's sometimes really frustrating. I can totally understand that if you're getting told it's a 15-minute wait, you've got other things to do, and it's not really hitting the threshold for you for a 999. That can be frustrating. We have the contact us page as well on the Police Scotland internet site. So basically, what you can do is click on that. It's I think it's 2 clicks and you're there. Or 1 click and you're there, in fact, and you basically fill out, it gives you up to 2,000 characters to say what's going on, ask you who you are, your contact telephone number, and basically that's the same as speaking to a call handler. That goes straight through into a waiting queue, and then someone, if they need more information, they would follow up and give you a call, or officers would be tasked to going out to dealing with that call. And the one that you spoke about there seems perfect for a contact us if you're getting that 15-minute wait time. So maybe it's more about getting comms out regarding to other reporting methods. It is a frustration. I know it's been looked at nationally. CI Leonard may be able to come in on this and inform a wee bit more, but I totally share your frustrations and know that it can be hard when you think, I need to get this reported now so that interventions can be made, and you're being told 50 minutes. So apologies for your wait time there.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that, Lee, if you want. Convener.
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, the 101 I appreciate is mentioned fairly regularly and is a source of frustration, as is any kind of call handling service, I imagine. The 101 system is also paired with our 999 system, and we've seen unprecedented kind of demand in the last, well, I think it's around about 20% increase in demand into both call handling systems. So when the 999 calls are particularly busy, then it's the 101 handlers who backfill to support that. So that can cause some delays with answering of the 101 system. However, it should signpost alternative methods of reporting to the police, and Lee's talked through that contact us forum. But if there are things that don't meet the threshold for dialing 999, then I would encourage people to use the contact us or use other contacts via community policing teams or into any other parts of the partnership. And if we can't attend immediately, if there's no ongoing threat to the public and we don't have the resources to deploy immediately to that, we can obviously look at thematic issues and direct our resources to that, as we've done with various issues that have been highlighted by communities.
Thanks, Tom. And I just wondered if we come back on that about the message there about using a different method. So I mean, it does tell you you're going to wait 15 minutes and it keeps reminding you. If that message could be changed to say, if you've got a 15-minute wait, however, if you go to this website or this area to report it in a different method, then that would be helpful as well, because I think we're losing a lot. People just hang up and just walk away from it. So we don't get those statistics. And as we've discussed in the past, you know, we need statistics to know that we've got something going on. And if it's not reported, then it's not happening. So if that message that's on the phone could be changed to say, you have a 15-minute wait, however, please fill out this contact us form on this particular website, that would be very helpful. You might get more information passed across. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I will pick that with our command and control division. My understanding was that those messages should kick in, particularly for periods for peak demand where we're unlikely to be able to answer the 101 calls as quickly as we would like to do. That message should be initiated to provide that direction, and there's alternative methods via the switchboard to route your inquiry if it's in relation to particular non-emergency themes. So I'll have a look at that, Councillor, and I'll raise that concern again with our command and control division, just in respect to the 101 service. But just to provide a bit of additional reassurance, the reviews that are ongoing just now in terms of policing following the budget announcement is very much focusing on our frontline service, and as part of that, our call handling service as well. So I can assure you that that is very much being prioritised and looked at nationally, but I'll pick up that point regarding those alternative methods.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. First of all, can I thank Sergeant Stewart, Sandy Robertson and Station Commander Sands for the presentations. Convener, I have just one question, and it relates to visitor management, which is maybe slightly different from the other questions we've had so far. We heard about Highland Perthshire, about Cluny Loch and Rightly, and about Rannoch and about visitor ranges. Could I just ask though, and there perhaps might be lessons learned for the Tay Forest National Park, but the arrangements for Loch Earn, and it's not just the police officers based in Stirling, but it's also the ranger service with the national park, Loch Lomond National Park. Can I just ask, given the problems in St Fillan's and the south side of Loch Earn in the past with dirty camping, with people parking in passing places, what the arrangements are, and do the partnership arrangements are, and do they feel that participants feel that they work effectively?
I can certainly start on that question. Loch Earn and St Fillan's, there was an information day held 2 months ago, and the community action team from Perth, we also had some of the Comrie operational crew got involved in that. It was a partnership approach as well. We went down there, and there was bits and pieces about enforcement. We were talking about water safety. There was quite a lot of camping ongoing that day. When we arrived, we were giving out information on carbon monoxide safety as well. So the idea of Loch Earn and that, I know Roddy's on the call as well, he would back me up on this one, is well and truly in the forefront of the thoughts with the partnership. We're aware of what is going on there, and there is work ongoing within that area on a regular basis. We know that the Rangers are out there quite a lot, and they will feed that information back into the partnership. So if there's anything extra required within that area, then it's something that we could work on for the partnership to deliver.
Okay.
Roddy, since you were name dropped, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to say that largely operationally, the Loch Lomond's and Trossachs Rangers sort of lead at Loch Earn. We support them where we can. That was negotiated by Andy Clegg with the wardens there, because they cover most of that area. We've had some really good engagement over the years with the people of St Fillan's about some of the problems they've had, and they haven't been. I don't think it's been as bad at St Fillan's this year as it had been in previous years, which is good, and we touched wood about that. Really interested in the developments around about the potential for National Park and the Tay Valley. That's interesting, and would give us access to other funding. I think the national parks enjoy certainly substantially more funding for rangers and visitor management than we do. So that would be interesting, although I don't particularly have an informed view on it at the moment.
Fair enough. It's early days, but yes, I think it is an important aspect. Thanks, Roddy.
Councillor Broad for your next question.
Thanks, Convener. I'm going to follow on from Councillor Hearn's point. He spoke about 101, and he also said, and that's the same that people say to me, they don't like to dial 999 because obviously it's the emergency number. But the problem always is that it takes so long to actually see any police turn up. And I'm just wondering, we've read in the papers obviously about potential budget cuts, which we're talking about reduction in numbers at a time when we want more police officers. Is this going to impact on response times to people who are suffering from vandalism and antisocial behaviour?
Convener, I can potentially come in just to cover that point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've been quite clear that what we're seeing in terms of the budget is a real term cut in officer numbers. Exactly how that will impact on Perth and Kinross is still to be established. We're obviously going through a period of national service redesign. and we're doing that at a local level as well just now. But very much our commitment is to protect frontline services. So our response and community teams and our new Chief Constables has provided a commitment to preserving and maintaining our community policing teams. So we will very much look, once we fully understand what that real terms cutting officer numbers looks like, we will look at our local model in terms of how we deliver policing in Perth and Kinross, but we will very much focus on that front term delivery, and I'm confident that we will still be able to respond to concerns within the community in line with the policing plan that we presented at the committee earlier this year. So hopefully that will provide some reassurance, and hopefully some of the activity that Lee and the wider partnership have touched on this morning will demonstrate just where we don't understand not only police numbers in respect of our response to a wide range of issues, including antisocial behaviour, but the strength is very much in the partnership approach. So it obviously brings additional resources and additional support to the police. What I would say is very much probably the theme of what's gone through this morning is, you know, this is something that we don't want communities to tolerate. We want people, if you are suffering from any form of antisocial behaviour, then I would urge people to contact the police. And I appreciate there may be some frustrations with the length of time it takes to get through on some occasions with a 101 system. But I would say if it's an emergency, if there's a crime that's occurring and there is a risk, then very much use the 999 system. If that's not the case, then please use 101 or some of the alternative methods of contacting, which we will circulate. And the reassurance is there that both within the police and the wider partnership, we will listen to you and we will address the issue.
Thank you.
Right, I have two more questions, then we'll be moving on to comments. So we're at Councillor McCall for your second question.
Thank you. This question's around Operation Moonbeam, and I think what you said is you're engaging with shops that sell fireworks and with schools, etc., etc. But are you doing any work with community groups and other places where citizens gather? You know, a lot of churches have community sessions or, you know, small cafes, and I'm just wondering if there's any leafleting being done in those areas.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think for the majority of the leafleting, it's from intelligence-led kind of information and where we go. We know there's distributors this year who aren't taking part. Some of the multinationals, Tesco's and Asda's, who aren't selling fireworks this year. With regards to the schools and the leafleting of businesses that we've done so far, again, yeah, I would probably suggest that was intelligence-led from the information that we had. If there is anything else, if there's further areas where people would like us to come in and deliver education or information, then yeah, by all means, we would be more than happy to do so.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you know, they access their community groups and even just posters and shop windows, even if they're not selling, about, you know, fireworks safety and the antisocial nature of some of it. I think that might just be helpful to spread the message a little bit. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll move away from cuts to police budgets and on something maybe a little bit more positive. I was really interested in the FSSE project. My friends' children are currently doing this, and they seem to spend a lot of time at Blairgowrie Fire Station turning hoses on each other, so they're really enjoying themselves. It seems to stop at 16, and I'm wondering why it stops at 16.
That for us is the policy. We take it as youth engagement. Thereafter, they move towards the more adult range within our policy. It doesn't necessarily stop completely. We could still deliver life skills. We've worked with the cadets again in Blairgowrie, in the Blairgowrie area, and you know they're coming in up to 21. So it's not a be all and end all where we would stop. But with regards to the schools engagements, then we would take them to 16 at that point.
Councillor Braun, you have your last couple of questions.
Promise there's the last two, and they'll link together. It was just very quickly. You talked about all the work you do, intervention and prevention. I just wonder if there's any sort of indication, figure-wise, of how successful this is. As an indication of how successful you've been in getting people to stop vandalism, whatever. And the other question linked to it is, which Lee, you mentioned very briefly in your presentation, sometimes it doesn't work, it ends up in court. I just wonder, what is the deterrent when you get to court? So how successful is it, and where does it end up? What happens at the end?
Some of the real.
Went on to mute accidentally.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, some of the issues I have when I'm reporting up the chain is, how do we evidence how interventions are working? It's difficult because, you know, preventing and is pretty hard to measure. Other than going on figures from last year, I don't have them to hand, so I wouldn't want to quote. But there's also frustrations that interactions with the police, even when we get the perpetrator for an incident, report them, that it goes through the justice process and people feel let down because they're not getting the outcomes that they want. And maybe that's another link of, because sometimes people come back to the police to ask for the explanation, and ultimately there's a million and one disposals people can get from the Procurator Fiscal Service or from something happening at court. But the one thing that we do have, as Sandy touched on earlier, is victim support and other third sector agencies that can come in and help people to get them over what's happened to them or whatever they're involved in, and support them. So that's really, we would share their frustrations, listen to people about how they feel they've been dealt with, or how the justice systems went for them, but then signpost them and find out what the supports are we can get in and around them. And one of the things is victim support. Another one is DBI, distress brief interventions, that we've got, that we can basically, it's a company, Penumbra, that do it. We can refer people into there and they can get interventions with them and counselling for up to 14 days and signposted further. So there's things that we can do to support and share people's frustration ultimately, but when we submit a case, there's only so much influence we have. We're reporting the facts to the fiscal service, and they're either taking that to court and presenting it, or disposing of it with one of the disposals they have, and sometimes we are just as frustrated as the victims are with outcomes, unfortunately.
I think one of the key things with an antisocial behaviour order is that it does give the police the power of arrest for things that normally they wouldn't get arrested for. And I think if we bring it down to what may seem as trivial to some but impacts on other people, is maybe like a continuous, thumping of the feet, etc. And when we have two people corroborating that incident's taken place and the police attend, although the incident is stopped, the two people corroborating it means that the police do have it within their power to go and arrest that person. The arrest will disrupt them. So they would get arrested, perhaps appear at court the next day, more than likely plead not guilty. But we find that disruption to their lives of being arrested at the time for things that they would normally get away with certainly helps as a deterrent. And we have had pretty shocked actually with an outcome with an antisocial behaviour case where someone whose behaviour led to them being remanded in custody for a period of time, which was quite unusual because, like I say, usually it's an appearance at court, it's a plead not guilty, and then they're released and appear at court at a later date. But the power of the antisocial behaviour order really took effect there, because the sheriff had obviously thought this is behaviour and continued behaviour is out of order, and I'm going to take steps to deal with it there and then. So it's not often, I think, that we get people with a custodial sentence at the end of an antisocial behaviour order, because it's not required. The behaviour usually stops because they are being arrested for offences and disrupting their lives, and pretty much giving some respite to the people suffering from it. And also the antisocial behaviour order, it empowers the people who have been victims, because they now have something that previously they couldn't do much about. Like I say, stamping of the feet, slamming of doors, these things that they couldn't really get a resolution for. It did empower them to actually be able to take steps to protect themselves and their families.
Can I just add to that as well? I think Chief Inspector Leonard and Roddy have just put in two comments on the chat, is what I was going to come to. I think it's with regards to the fire service intervention. I think it's that early challenge with regards to behaviours, respect, etc. That's where we'll take our overall kind of indicator from with regards to, are we getting the same sort of or number of referrals from schools or from youth groups or from criminal justice or from police partners or from community safety wardens with regards to the interventions that we would do. So yeah, I can only back up everything that both Chief Inspector Leonard and Roddy have put in the chat there.
Are you content, Councillor Brown? Thank you very much. Councillor Barrett, for your comment.
Thanks, Convener. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to all the partners involved and everybody that's involved in tackling antisocial behaviour in Perth and Kinross. And I think back just to the previous meeting of this committee, where I think we did get a report which had detailed within that the remarkable reduction in instances of antisocial behaviour. So I think that's a testament to the work done by all the partners, and I think the extensive and effective nature of the partnerships that we have been key to delivering those improvements. So I wouldn't want people to get the impression that there's an epidemic of antisocial behaviour out there, because the exact opposite is the truth, and that's certainly not to minimise the impacts of antisocial behaviour on individuals and neighbourhoods where it occurs. And I think that's something that this committee has taken on board and considered seriously and positively and proactively in the past, whether that's been from the additional resources put in the HRA to tackle antisocial behaviour, which was something which gained unanimous support in the last council, and those resources have been added to in subsequent HRA budgets, which again has helped deliver that reduction in antisocial behaviour, and big moves like the Countryside Ranger service as well, and significant investment that's happened there. So I think money has been important, but I think so has a change of attitude, and I think things like the pledge and the vow demonstrate that change of attitude and willingness to be proactive on behalf of all the services that have been involved. I've certainly seen remarkable change in how the housing service approaches the support it provides to people with complex and multiple vulnerabilities and issues, who can often be, if left to their own devices or to other people's devices, the source of disruption in their community. And I think there's certainly been an acknowledgement within the teams that they have a responsibility to support those people and prevent those sorts of things happening. I think it's also important in a chamber here which is dominated by the grey-haired and the no-haired, that we remember what we were like in our childhood, and I was certainly banned from telling my sons about all sorts of risk-taking behaviours that I indulged in as a child. And 50 odd years ago, cycling on a bike without a helmet or with barely visible lights wasn't considered risk-taking behaviour, and you wouldn't have got stopped by the police in the street for doing something like that. I think we have to remember, risk-taking is part of growing up, and the important thing is, where do we step in when sort of the growing up process spills over into real risk, either for the individuals taking part in that, or other people who suffer consequences of that. So I think this is a remarkable success story. To my mind, some of this work should have awards written all over it, and I hope that some of the team members have the time to consider what awards they might be able to apply for and to submit an application for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bailey Brough.
Thank you, Convener. Really, I just want to say a great presentation that we've had there, and I want to say how well it has been in my ward, and I want to especially thank Sandy and Roddy and the partnership team, all of them that was involved in any of the incidents that have been happening over the past couple of years, and I think it's fair to say we've come out with the good results. So I'm delighted that, you know, working in partnership has certainly made a big difference. So really my message today is just to say thanks to the partnership team for working. You know, things have actually happened quicker than one would have expected. I know some things can take a bit longer, but in overall of it is, I think working in partnership has certainly made a great difference to my ward anyway. So just thanks, that's all I really want to say today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, convener, and thanks to Sandy Lee and Campbell for a very interesting presentation. For those of you who don't know me, in a former life I was a police officer too, and I remember in the 80s going out to do a survey in the division, and at that time, you know, things like car crime and housebreaking and robberies were the more serious crimes that were happening in the area, and that was the perception of the response that you would get when you say, well, what is it you want the police to focus on? But I was quite surprised to find out that actually antisocial behaviour was the response, because whilst you may be unlucky to get your car stolen once or twice in your lifetime, antisocial behaviour was all pervasive, and folk were having to live with it day in, day out, on their doorsteps and outside their houses all the time. So they were keen, you know, that obviously the authorities focused on antisocial behaviour, and if we could get rid of that from their lives, they would put up with some of the other things perhaps that would happen to them. But it just shows you that sometimes your perception of what's important to the public isn't always what you think, and antisocial behaviour is a very debilitating environment, I think, to be putting up with day in, day out. Thanks very much, guys, for your work and for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, convener. This has been an interesting committee, and revelations of Councillor Barrett's youth and his criminality, of course, opens the door to much more inquiries, I think. It could be a police investigation already now coming. But I would like to agree with Peter. I would like to agree with Peter that you know, we don't want to dramatise this out of proportion. It is important to people who suffer from vandalism and antisocial behaviour, but it is a minority. I think it's important to put it into perspective. The vast majority of our young people are responsible upcoming adults who do good in their communities, and I think that's important to note. I want to thank again the team that do all this work. I'm sure they do a lot. I know from Councillor Hearn sometimes he talks about it and the work they do and the benefits it comes, and Roddy Ross I've spoken to as well about this. Now, they obviously do a lot of good work. And my only comment would be that is a feeling that at the end there has to be a deterrent in the law for people who do commit these offences, and I always do, and I will criticise again, this concept of soft touch justice does not work, and there always needs to be a fallback deterrent at the end of the day. But as again, I am very pleased with the work that this group do, and I think it's important that it's made public. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. I really just want to add my thanks for the presentation. As always, it was revealing as to detail that I was a wee bit unaware of, but thank you for the impact of the works of the team. And, you know, it really is helpful to have an understanding of everything that goes on behind it, and just well done and thank you.
Thank you very much. And Bill Ahern.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks very much, guys, for the presentation. Really, really useful. Just wanted to pick up on a comment that Roddy put into the chat, which was about the close ties between community justice and community safety. And it's fair to say that a couple of years ago, as chair, I decided to see if we could put the two together into one committee and see how successful that was. And it's not as successful across the country as we've made it. We seem to be very good in Perth and Kinross Council at partnerships, partnership working. As we can see, we've got co-location here on the screen today with services in one building, which makes a big difference to partnership working. And we have made a very good success of community justice and community safety being in the same breadth in the same committee, partnership. So much so that we've been asked by Community Justice Scotland to report to them on the 9th of November about how we've made it successful in this council and how we've moved things forward. And an officer and I will be attending that briefing to explain how we've made that successful. So well done to everybody that has any connection with community justice and community safety, and that pretty much goes across every service in the council. So thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments, and thank everybody for their input today. I think all the questions and comments I've had have added to the presentations that were before us. And I think this has been a very good move to actually have this on the agenda in this way. And I look forward to this type of topic being covered again in a similar manner. I think we got to more depth in it than we would normally do, just looking at some statistics. So thank you, Lee. Thank you, Cammy. Thank you, Sandy, for your presentations. And thank you for others who inputted. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda, which again is now a presentation, tackling violence against women and girls in Perth and Kinross.
Thank you, convener. And we have slides. I'm just going to talk to you a bit about an initial introduction is about prevalence. We don't know about prevalence, but what we do know is prevalence is extraordinary. It's everywhere in society across all classes and creeds. So estimate of prevalence is almost pointless putting a number on it. But what we do know is extremely high, and it manifests itself. We accept that it's high, but we move on, and that allows us to understand it when we need to work in our partnerships. I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnership just now and what that looks like. You will see on this slide I've got a number of the agencies that we work with in Perth and Kinross. Perth and Kinross Violence Against Women Partnership brings a wide range of statutory and voluntary agencies in Perth with the aim of improving agency responses to women, children and young people who have experienced violence. Violence Against Women Partnership believes that participation will result in better service provision, improve legal protection and prevent further abuse to women, children and young people. This aim is in line with Scottish Government's Equally Safe, which is Scotland's strategy for preventing and eradicating violence against women. As I say, we have a wide number of partners up on the screen there. We're really delighted in Perth and Kinross the amount of services that we have within our partnership who want to feed into us at a local level. We're very blessed with that. Our strategic aims, it was established in Perth and Kinross in 2008, so we've come quite a long way since then. Back then it was a forum and it then moved on in 2010 to become a partnership. And that mainly was to look at providing and promoting a strategic multi-agency response to violence against women and girls. And that was again to put aligning it on that strategic way. The strategic aims, which we'll touch upon today, is prevention, protection, provision and participation, which is cut across all the following objectives and reflect the complex nature of violence against women and the interdependence of initiatives aimed at making improvements. So some of these things that we look at within our partnership is we need to promote and coordinate an effective interagency response to male violence with the aim of ending violence against women and reducing women's fear of violence. We work in partnership to develop a consistent and quality service to our women, our children and our young people affected by male violence. We also have to look at, which we'll touch upon, reducing risk and ensure improved protection for women and their children. To ensure perpetrators, this is a big thing, that they're held to account. Again, we'll speak to that today. To develop and lead on our primary prevention approaches, which tackle the root causes of violence against women and girls. And again, ensure that we've got strategic planning. That's absolutely key. And our activities is informed by the experience of women, young people and children. And we have the voices of service users. That's absolutely really important in how we develop our service. We also look to inform and influence the Scottish Government of any emerging issues and trends in relation to violence against women and girls as well. What do we ask for our partner agencies that you see on the screen up there? We ask that they acknowledge us and they work really closely to define what violence against women actually means. as outlined in our Scottish Government Equally Safe strategy to eradicate and prevent violence against women and girls. We also ask that they take overall responsibility for the delivery of their agency's actions within the set timescales. So again, we're really lucky in Perth and Kinross. When we meet 4 times a year, and our agencies are all very keen to get their voice over about how we eradicate violence against women and girls in Perth and Kinross. So everyone has a voice, and we make sure everyone has that opportunity to talk to us and that we don't leave everyone out. We don't have up there all the other agencies that are within the partnership, which is the Scottish Prison Service. We have NHS. We have obviously our social worker adult protection team. We have Sir Optimus. We have churches. There's an umbrella group within Perth and Kinross. They attend as well. So we're really quite wide-reaching, and we don't leave anyone out. And I think that's really important. And I think for people out there, they often say, well, what does the partnership mean to you? But when they come and join us, they see such a difference in how we make things work. And if we don't sit and talk about things, and if no one has a voice, we'll never know. So that really works in our advantages at Perth and Kinross, because like Councillor Hearn touched upon earlier, the partnership working in Perth and Kinross is excellent, and we're very proud, and I'm very proud to be part of that. COVID was a bit of a challenge for us. I know I'm using the word COVID, but actually the running of the partnership back then was pretty much business as usual. And I wanted to just brief you on that and give you reassurance that our partner agencies had to think very differently as to how they delivered services both remotely and how survivors were still able to access services when needed it most. Basically, within the partnership, what we agreed was we would look at a very rigorous performance management system and how we would manage that, and how again the voice would come in from our partner agencies, particularly Perthshire Women's Aid and RASAC. They then have to report into us now how many people they have that are being referred into their services, as well as those who are on the waiting lists. Now, throughout COVID, as you can imagine, waiting lists were through the roof. They were very high, but they were manageably high. In terms of survivors, nobody lost touch. We were able to keep in touch with everyone who was accessing the services. I suppose it's the people that we don't know about, the underreporting element of that. I've got that up there. That's a key thing for us. Again, what we don't know is the hidden damages that causes, and how people, if we're not getting reported into the system, it's people who are maybe missing out, and people that we need to be allowing them quick access into the services more. As I say, there had been an increase in waiting lists, but again, that allowed us a performance management system to work. One of the examples I could give throughout COVID was there's a substantial waiting list, and women were struggling, again, with mental health, substance issues, other underlying issues that may have an effect as well in terms of their own home life. So we were able to speak to our partner agencies who had put in bids. Now, this wouldn't have happened before, quite a huge bid that came in through our partnership, in terms of we put a business case forward to a couple of external agencies to look at waiting lists and stuff with staff, and we were able to attain additional funding, which was absolutely amazing, from Ganachie Trust. So we're ever so grateful that was for both agencies to look at staffing and resourcing to bring these waiting lists down. So throughout the partnership, there's always opportunities for us, as long as we're speaking about it regularly. So can I move on to the next slide, please? I'd like to bring in Jennifer Reid, who's a detective inspector from Police Scotland. So Jennifer will speak to half part of this slide. Are you there?
Jennifer, if you are speaking, then you're on mute. You're behind the slide, so we can't see you at the moment.
Apologies, I am on screen and I have been for a wee while. Obviously, I've just now been able to unmute myself. So what Morning everybody, and thank you, and obviously thanks to Jennifer for starting off the presentation. But as Jennifer said, we've obviously been involved in the partnership since it was established back in 2008, and then obviously as it's developed through 2010 into the current day. And as much as we've got the Violence Against Women partnership, we also link in across our other partnerships in terms of child protection, offender management, and through our strategic partners against all of those social issues that Jennifer spoke about there. So as everybody will know, that domestic abuse is one of Police Scotland's priorities, and it remains so. And the new Chief Constable is obviously committed to protecting vulnerable people from harm, keeping people safe, and everything that Jennifer mentioned in terms of the priorities of the Perth and Kinross partnership absolutely aligned to our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy that obviously was published in this year, earlier in the year. We obviously engage extensively with our partners in Perth and Kinross and rely heavily on them to try and keep vulnerable people safe in Perth and Kinross, and we absolutely couldn't do it on our own. I'm going to probably just give you a sort of rundown briefly of how we respond to domestic abuse, and then obviously what that involves. But as Jennifer said, I'm the Detective Chief Inspector for Public Protection, and under my remit I've got domestic abuse investigations, which includes our domestic abuse liaison officers and the safeguarding. But we are the specialist team and actually the delivery of domestic abuse in Perth and Kinross, and the response to domestic abuse very much sits with Chief Inspector Leonard as the area commander, and we obviously work closely together to make sure that we are delivering effective responses to any victim who has reported being abused by a perpetrator, a partner, whether that's a current partner or an ex-partner. The response to domestic abuse, the critical bit of it is getting it right at that first opportunity. So when we receive a call about a domestic incident, whether it's physical, sexual, verbal harassment, any number of incidents can have a domestic abuse aggravation, but essentially when we engage with victims, it's that first response and that first engagement that will probably set the tone. So we really need to be key in getting that right. Obviously all our officers are given training around the response to domestic abuse, and obviously treating victims in a way that is centred on their needs rather than what obviously we think that they should do. We're sympathetic. We need to understand that trauma and the impact of domestic abuse, and actually that the first time somebody phones, it's probably taking quite a lot of courage for that person to pick up the phone to us to report that. And essentially, if we're getting that information in from partners as well, our first engagement with a victim of domestic abuse can probably be very key in how they continue to engage, which obviously allows us to make sure that we can try and keep them safe as best we can. We every single day review every morning every domestic incident that's happened across Perth and Kinross, but also across the Tayside division as a whole. Our Tom will very much say that they obviously review all the incidents that have happened in Perth and Kinross, but in partnership with our domestic abuse liaison officers, we absolutely assess every incident that's happened. Officers who have been at the incident will be involved in carrying out the risk assessment initially with the victim, which will involve reading and going through the domestic abuse questionnaire, which is a series of questions with the victim of domestic abuse to try and identify risk factors. And obviously within those questions there will be things that will highlight whether or not they're at significant risk of harm. We review those incidents every single morning to make sure that we are making sure that victims are supported, but equally that we're going to be targeting perpetrators, which I'll speak about in a wee bit of time. But key to it is absolutely the response, engaging victims, trying to identify and make them safe at that point in time, but obviously as the days progress following that initial call to police, and obviously that our engagement with them and any support services that might need is as smooth as it can be, given that they're experiencing probably significant trauma and potentially upsetting their home life in terms of do they need housing, they've obviously potentially got children within the home and how that impacts. The domestic abuse questionnaire that every officer answers, as I said, identifies sort of heightened risk, and our DLOs, or domestic abuse liaison officers, review that and essentially will identify those that are high risk, and there will be contact with any high risk victims within the 24-hour period of first report. Other risks that are identified would be medium or standard risk, and they will also get a follow-up contact, but it's obviously just not within that 24-hour period. Safety planning is absolutely key when a victim contacts police. We don't want to leave anybody having reported domestic abuse where they are left unsafe, whether that's at home or in another location. And every officer that responds to domestic abuse are all pretty good now at identifying ways to try and keep victims safe. And all of that information is recorded on our crime report system, but also on our vulnerable person database that our domestic abuse liaison officers can then review and ultimately can then engage with the extensive partners in Perth and Kinross and share information so that we can continue to keep victims safe once they've had that initial police contact. I have got responsibility for the police solos that's on the screen. That is the sexual offences liaison officers. The majority of our, or certainly my, domestic abuse investigators who are the specialists are sexual offences liaison officers, and the solo role is essentially to engage with any victim who has been a victim of a serious sexual offence, including rape, and as you will appreciate, some of the domestic offences will involve significant serious sexual violence as well, and they would be deployed to engage with a victim and keep them safe. Solo is absolutely key in getting, again, that victim engagement, but also in part the safety planning and then the referrals that victims might need in terms of ongoing support, advocacy and mental health support. So they are key in making those links for any victim of significant sexual offences. Jennifer, just say if you want to interject at any point, but where victims don't or aren't ready to engage with police, there are opportunities to engage with our partners or be referred into our partners without necessarily reporting a crime. And the Sexual Assault Response Coordination Centre, which is the SARC that's on the screen there, that actually offers victims of serious sexual crime an opportunity to not engage with police, but to go and have a medical examination, which will collect and gather forensic evidence at the point of the offence having happened, will give them the opportunity to get medical support, allow the capture of evidence, and then allow them to access support services without necessarily coming to police. The self-referral protocol obviously runs across all the NHS health boards across Scotland now. It's been put in place, and any victim of serious sexual health without coming to police contact through NHS would come to the Kingsway Care Centre in Dundee. That services all victims across the Tayside area that don't want to engage with police if they want to reach into a service to get medical help and then ultimately allow the forensic capture of evidence. At the point where they want to then report to police, they can be supported to do that, and then police obviously will have the ability to access that forensic medical information and obviously then investigate any offences. But we absolutely want to give victims the opportunity to engage when they're ready, to keep them safe in the process, and if they're not yet ready to speak to us, then we absolutely rely on our partners to deliver that service, and the information that obviously we exchange between them is key to try and keeping people safe. I'm going to go on and speak to Marek, but I'll maybe bring that in if Jennifer wants to speak about some of the advocacy work, and then it culminates potentially essentially in everybody coming together at Marek, where we obviously discuss victims who have been identified as high risk and every agency is involved in that safety planning. For those that are not aware of MARAC and what it has been before, that is obviously the multi-agency risk assessment conference that brings together all the partners, and essentially it is a homicide prevention panel to try and put things in place to keep victims safe and prevent any significant harm from coming to them. As I say, they happen across the Tayside area, but specifically in Perth and Kinross, they are held fortnightly. And Jennifer might want to come in and speak a bit about that before she moves on, but I can touch on any of that other stuff again and answer any questions that people might have at the end of the presentation. Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Again, that was a really quick whirlwind. There's so much depth to the work that's involved with Police Scotland. So I would give elected members the opportunity to, if they wish to speak to myself and Jennifer again, another forum, then we would welcome that opportunity with you. Jennifer talked about MARAC there. Yeah, MARAC is now at the moment we are currently meeting fortnightly within Perth and Kinross. The reason for that is it normally meets monthly, but the reason for that was there was a higher level of referrals coming through at Perth. But actually what that has allowed us to do is work quite quicker in terms of referrals coming through. So at the moment we're going to keep that at fortnightly. It has been very high, but we are managing to minimise that now because of the level of, because we're meeting fortnightly rather than monthly. That's a real opportunity again, is for increasing the safety and health and wellbeing of victims. The agency coordination is very quick. The opportunities for sharing information about high risk cases is utilised very quickly. The role and refuge that we've got there, again, our relationships within housing is excellent. Both services, particularly Perthshire Women's Aid, comment on the quick turnaround from our housing colleagues with regards to women who present through domestic abuse. And again, we're very lucky to have a role in refuge to support that and women moving on into different communities. We have outreach support, we have advocacy support, we have counselling, we have independent advocacy, the CEDAR project, which currently works out of Perthshire Women's Aid. That is a project that works with children who are experiencing domestic violence and abuse within their household. So again, there is quite a number of people sitting on that particular group. Again, a very worthwhile cause within Perth and Kinross within Perthshire Women's Aid. And again, working with victims and witnesses is key within all these processes. On to the next slide, please. Jennifer, I'll let you come in here to talk about the perpetrator programmes.
No, thanks, Jennifer. So obviously we've spoken about the response to victims of domestic abuse, but when officers actually turn up at an incident where police have been called, ultimately, depending on what has or is reported at that point in time, there are a number of actions essentially we will take, but most of the perpetrator response is about trying to remove the perpetrator and make victims safe. Most, if not all, domestic offences where the perpetrator is traced at the scene of the crime or the incident are arrested and brought into police custody. That custody process allows us to arrest initially or not officially accused, and at that point they can be brought into custody and can be interviewed for offences where at the point of the incident and officers' attendance there's sufficiency of evidence, then the perpetrator would be arrested as an officially accused person and would be brought to custody. But all officers in response to domestic abuse make the full assessment at the time of the incident around what has been reported, whether victims are engaging, perpetrators being present, other evidence that might be available, given that domestic incidents invariably happen in private with two persons present, but we would absolutely seek to engage with neighbours, access CCTV to maximise any opportunity to arrest perpetrators for domestic abuse and bring them into custody. At that point, obviously, when they come into custody and if they are then charged with an offence, there will be discussions around whether or not that person needs to be held in custody. And we've got obviously a number of options, so they can be released from custody to be reported, but that would not give us any option to try and put measures in place to safeguard victims. We can release from custody on a police undertaking, which requires a person to appear at court at a future date. And obviously with a police undertaking, there are conditions that can be put in place to safeguard victims. And then the third one, which can be effective, is the held in custody to appear at court. We, as investigators, don't necessarily make that decision or make any of those decisions. We make them having provided information to our custody department at the point in time, and obviously there's a full review about how best to protect victims, but also how best to then deal with the perpetrator of any offence. As I said, the big part of it is about being able to continue to keep victims safe. So releasing perpetrators with no conditions is particularly limited. So an undertaking where we can add conditions in, or potentially put a person to custody for court, where we can ask for bail conditions to be put in place following any court appearance, is the absolute essential discussions that we have, and absolutely that's what we seek to do in every case where there's been a domestic perpetrator arrested. For those offenders that are on undertakings or have appeared at court and are then released on bail conditions, we have bail management processes in place within Perth and Kinross, but also within Dundee and also in Angus, that prior to any release from custody, the victim of the offence is made aware that the perpetrator is being released. So that is done prior to any release. And then essentially during the period before appearing at court or where there's bail conditions, there are continual checks, ongoing links in with our partners to make them aware of safeguarding conditions that are in place so that they can continue to have contact with victims. And ultimately, if there's any information that then comes to ourselves that evidences there has been a breach of any undertaking or bail condition, that we can then take action to arrest the perpetrator for breach of those conditions. The MATAC process that's on the screen there, that is our multi-agency tasking and coordination, which is perpetrator focused, and it's about targeting the perpetrators that are deemed to be high risk perpetrators or prolific perpetrators. And essentially that process was introduced back in 2013, and it also falls under the Scottish Government Equally Safe strategy under priority 4, and links in with our own strategy about targeting perpetrators. The aim of MATAC is about targeting perpetrators and offenders who present the greatest risk of harm, and ultimately where we have information that we've got a perpetrator who has potentially committed offences to a current partner, but we have information that there's potentially been previous partners where there's under-reporting or no reporting or previously reported offences that have not potentially reached the stage of charge, then we can target those offenders to try and bring them to justice. MATAC takes place on a monthly basis within the Tayside division and covers all 3 areas. We don't have bespoke meeting for MATAC in Perth and Kinross on its own, and the numbers obviously that are coming through tend to be sort of new referrals monthly, under 5 I would say, and currently at the moment we have 8 MATAC target packages out, which sit between the special investigation unit that I have, which is domestic abuse investigations, but also sit with our colleagues at the domestic abuse task force, which sit under a different division, under our specialist crime division, and we work closely with them when we've got any perpetrator who has been identified as a MATAC target. MATAC previously sat with specialist crime division, and they carried the responsibility for that. However, that returned to local policing towards the end of 2022, and since it's been back in division, has been working well. We obviously, the same partners that are involved in the processes around MARAC also are involved at the MATAC process, and absolutely information sharing is key to the effectiveness of the process and the meeting, and making sure that we've got the right information and we're targeting the right people who present the greatest risk of harm. We've had some successful outcomes in the Perth and Kinross area just over the last year. In July, there were 2 significant sentences imposed for MATAC perpetrators, and obviously those investigations sat between the Domestic Abuse Task Force and within Perth and Kinross Domestic Abuse Services. But certainly every perpetrator that is appearing for a series of domestic offending over a prolonged period of time all seem to be attracting significant custodial sentences when they've been sentenced at the court. Jennifer, I'll let you come in there to speak about obviously the rest of the stuff on screen, but we can come back into it, and happy to link in if there's any questions about that, or you want me to link into anything else, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. And we've talked about their work within the prisons as well. We're not just standing by when the perpetrators go to prison. So we deal with attitudes that lead to offending, and it's not always what we know about. They may have been in prison for something other than for housebreaking, but if we get in early to prevent further behaviours, again, the work that gets done within the prisons currently, early intervention is key. For those not in prison, we are currently looking at a non-mandatory court programme to work with perpetrators to prevent escalation. That's one of the things that we have just brought to the partnership within the last few months. The Caledonian programme, again, this has been ongoing, working with perpetrators who have been convicted and are working with our colleagues within criminal justice to look at their behaviour and change their attitudes in terms of violence against women and girls. I'll move on to talk a little about prevention. Prevention is absolutely key when it comes to our interventions in Perth and Kinross. We have quite a number of ongoing agencies that work within our schools. We've got the Mentors Against Violence, which are working with young people within the schools. We have mentors that are working within RASAC that go out to deliver programmes within the schools widely across Perth and Kinross. I think we're engaged very heavily with most secondary schools. Trauma-informed practices, again, we're delivering and developing a trauma-informed programme, working again within the schools and practices across Perth and Kinross. We have RASAC ambassadors. That again then ties and aligns alongside our Mentors Against Violence, working within the schools to look at behavioural change within young people and attitudes, again working with particularly pertaining to young males. So again, that's a very successful scheme that's working. PWA schools programmes, that is ongoing, has been for some time, and again very successful. Equally safe within schools, again that's something that we are trying to roll out within every secondary school. We have very limited resources when it comes to equally safe within the schools. However, the partnership have agreed that within the next sort of 12 months that intervention that we will look, I think we've only got 2 to 3 schools that are currently participating within that, and RASAC go in and deliver the programme to the secondary schools. But again, because of capacity and resources, we need to make sure that we've got a bit more time and that it's higher up the agenda when it comes to curriculum in terms of wellbeing, working with young people and moving towards equally safe within schools. National campaigns, yeah, we have quite a lot on the go in terms of national campaigns. Last year, Police Scotland brought out the That Guy campaign and Don't Be That Guy. Again, that was led quite heavily involved in all the local media channels, STV, BBC Scotland. There was a lot of reports around it at the time and what that meant and what that looked like for males, and in terms of how that was it was actors who they'd brought in, but it was all males who participated in that. So it was very, very powerful. And I think they were looking to roll that out. Well, it was rolled out across Scotland and wider. And I think there was a lot of interest from out with the UK as well in terms of how we're looking at behavioural change and how it works. It was quite hard hitting as well, but again, very worthwhile. 16 days. We have been putting on 16 days for a number of years. This is a United Nations campaign, which is to eradicate violence against women and girls. But at a local level, we tirelessly try very hard to ensure that we are covering the more topical subjects that we feel are very relevant to people within Perth and Kinross and at a wider reach audience at a national level. So this year we launch on the 25th of November in the Horsecross at 11 o'clock. We have a number of activities after that. We have the Universal Story, which we will have on the Saturday at the Perth Museum, which is about a group of women from all around the world who talk about their experiences pertaining to violence and what it means to them. So last year we put that on at the Burks Aberfeldy, but I've brought them down to Perth this year. Again, it's just to raise awareness and so that people know that this does happen every day in every day's life, and how we can move forward. We have the Reclaim the Night March. We also have we have a female comedy night, which is ongoing as well on the second Saturday. We have 2 seminars that we'll be having as well. Our first seminar is talking about communications and what that looks like in the press and out with. And then our second one, we have 2 speakers. We have Assistant Chief Constable from Police Scotland, Beck Smith, come along, and we also have Luke Hart, who is a national campaigner against violence against women and girls. So quite a busy agenda, lots going on. I will share that timetable this week again. It will be getting shared drip fed over the next 4 weeks. So if you hear from me regularly, please don't be offended. It's just because I'm getting word out there as best I can and to ensure that everyone is sharing that. Okay, moving on then. What's next for the Perth and Kinross Violence Against Women Partnership? Well, in January, I sit as a member of the Improvement Service within Scotland. The 32 local authorities meet every 2 months to discuss the wide agenda that affects violence against women and girls. So part of that, I brought in the Improvement Service to our partnership in January of this year. So that was a really interesting opportunity for us to look at what does the partnership look like, how can we make it more effective, how can we make it better, what can we be doing better, what are we doing wrong, if anything, making sure everyone had a voice to play in that and a part to play in that, and it was really, really useful. So on the back of that, we've had to look at our work action plan for 3 years, and we're now looking at our self-evaluation again, how we deliver on violence against women and girls in Perth and Kinross. So absolutely key in how we move forward for our priorities for the next 2 to 3 years. Irvine report I have up there, the Leslie Irvine report, what this was, came to us in June. It was finalised in June, and it's an independent strategic review of funding of Commission of Violence Against Women and Girls in Scotland. What this is asking every local authority in Scotland is to look at, to develop a more consistent, coherent, collective and stabilised funding model that will ensure high quality, accessible, specialised services across Scotland for those affected by violence against women and girls. Now, at the moment, we're a non-statutory service as violence against women and girls. If this report does go ahead, if this review does go ahead, then that would sit and it would align us alongside child protection and adult protection, which is really quite exciting from my point of view, a real opportunity to open up doors and how we can manage our services better. As I touched upon earlier briefly on the Equally Safe strategy, that is for eradicating violence against women and girls, and it's rooted into gender equality and aims to improve the outcomes for those affected and challenge the attitudes that perpetrate within that. So we are consistently making sure that we are following these equally safe standards. What does the Irvine report mean to Perth and Kinross? Well, we kind of anticipate that Equally Safe will be decentralised and given to local partnerships to administrate and commission services. We're watching this really closely because I think the rollout of this was to be by June 24. Or by the end of 24. So again, it is just work in progress, but as far as, again, as the partnership concerned, our chair, Hazel Robertson, myself and my team leader, Roddy Ross, we're managing to now pull together a plan to allow us to preempt anything that we think may come our way, and we've put it into different phases. There was 32 recommendations for phase 1. We've managed to bring in 12 priorities that we think we need to get in now to start the ball rolling for looking at how what this partnership will look like for future. The non-mandatory perpetrator programmes we touched upon, and multi-agency training, again, that's something we're absolutely ambitious about. We're constantly, it's an open door when it comes to training. RASAC, Perthshire Women's Aid and all our partner agencies are actively involved with delivering training, but equally as a partnership, working alongside our colleagues in Police Scotland, we have to make sure that we're delivering multi-agency and opportunities for everyone to attend, and so that everyone has that, again, that voice, and it's not just aimed at staff, it's for everyone who would want to participate or learn more about the background within that. I touched upon Equally Safe within Scotland. We have to, as a partnership, deliver on our Equally Safe standards, which we have. I have done this for the last 2 years. Last year, we're one of the best operating, I am told, one of the best operating partnerships within Scotland. Our score was very, very high. We only scored down on a couple of things, one of which was youth engagement. But again, it's how, again, you write how that was written up maybe at the time. We have made every effort to ensure that we're working alongside our youth alliances and youth groups. Community engagement as well was one of the things that they highlighted to us. Again, we are quite passionate about that. As a lead officer, make sure that we're going out to communities to raise awareness without violence against women and girls. We've also now have to look at gaps in provision of services to make sure everybody is getting access to services, and working with different multi-ethnic groups. So have been out and done a couple of talks to different organisations to encourage and support women who are out there that maybe feel they need the confidence to report in, and how they go about doing that. So again, we're very, very big on training, and that's definitely the way forward as far as that goes. And that's me. Thank you, Convener.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation from yourselves. We have a couple of indication of questions already, so I'll go quickly to Councillor Leishman.
Thanks very much, Convener, and thank you to both Jennifers, one online as well. That was fascinating. What a body of work that you do, and a difficult topic. Lots of difficult topics. So thanks very much. My first question is: I believe that women are disproportionately impacted and affected by the cost of living crisis. I'm just interested to hear about what sort of impacts are you finding that the cost of living crisis is having on women and their safety and their well-being in Perth and Kinross.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we are working tirelessly at looking at what that looks like and what that means to women who are hitting hard-hitting times, how we can move forward with that. The partnership, we do ask intervention from our agencies, from RASAC and Perthshire Women's Aid, what that looks like in terms of when women present to them, what is it they're presenting with, because often when a woman presents, that it's not just the one challenge that they're faced with, and the biggest challenge is obviously domestic abuse, but within that, within the woman itself, there may be other underlying, mental health, substance misuse. So it's all about how we manage that, and also looking at crisis point, but we are working and discussing it quite regularly. We don't know what that looks like yet because it is obviously ongoing, but we will work with our partners to ensure we're getting the right response for women who are affected by it. Okay.
Bill Ahern.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the two Jennifers. I think my question is more pointed towards Jennifer Reid, and it's about the arrest and prosecution of perpetrators. And you did say a bit about in your discussion about the when you've got a perpetrator on scene and you can go through the charge and the prosecution. The problem is when you have historical cases of abuse, and when I mean historical, I mean from a couple of days to a couple of years, and the threshold to get evidence and to charge is very, very high in those circumstances. And having spoken to Razak a number of times and trying for them, when survivors walk through the door, to say I've been abused, raped, or whatever has happened to them from somebody else, trying to get them to move forward to a prosecution is very difficult sometimes. And I just wonder, even getting them to court is difficult, but when they've gone through the court process, the chance of getting a successful prosecution is even harder. And I just wonder what work is being done with the court system and the procurator fiscals to make this not just easier, but to try and get a better successful rate of prosecutions.
Yeah, thank you for that. And obviously locally, anytime that we've got domestic offences that are significant or non-recent, and it's especially when it's potentially one of my own specialist officers that are dealing with domestic abuse, we link and work closely with the Procurator Fiscal, who is obviously marking and assessing all the evidence in the case. But there is obviously ongoing work around domestic abuse courts with the Scottish Government, and actually looking at courts that are bespoke to deal with the offending. Any non-recent crime is particularly challenging to investigate. However, we will take all steps to try and identify sources of corroborative evidence so that we can actually bring perpetrators to justice, and actually work then with the courts to try and present that evidence to make sure that we can secure any kind of conviction for victims. Domestic abuse is absolutely challenging, and we probably haven't done it justice in terms of the partnership work that goes on in Perth and Kinross. It's essentially a snapshot. Every case is different, and I think that's also quite challenging as well. Every victim's different, every victim requires different level of support and safety planning, and essentially every perpetrator is different as well. So there is no one size fits all, and we as the police will do everything we can to secure any evidence, whether it's happened in the last 24 hours or 24 years ago, because obviously we are focused on trying to prevent it happening again to anybody else, and making sure that perpetrators are brought to justice.
Councillor McCall, for your first question.
Thank you very much, both of you. This has been very helpful. I've noticed that most of what we've talked about is after the fact, and I'm just wondering what activity is going on in terms of prevention to try and break the cycle. In particular, I know that Tom Lender's probably heard me asking this question before about what we can do in schools to help educate young people about what is acceptable behaviour and what's not. I think it's a well-known fact to this committee and probably others that the increase in the availability of online pornography has skewed to some extent young people's view of what is acceptable and normal behaviour, and also what consent means. So I'm just wondering what work the partnership's involved in terms of trying to do the prevention side of it, so that we can hopefully see a reduction in violence against women and girls going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Yeah, there is a huge amount of work, like I had highlighted earlier, about the number of work that goes on within the schools, particularly the secondary schools. There has been a new campaign that's been utilised recently, which was Bold Girls Ken, and it's a group of young girls. There's 8 different young females from different secondaries across Perth and Kinross who are talking about or challenging attitudes within society and young male behaviours, and that will include such as use of social media and out with that. Media is a huge thing for us and how we can interject within the schools, but all I can say to you and reassure you, Councillor McCall, is behind the scenes there is an awful lot of work that we are constantly and it's an evolving door in terms of what's the current subject, and like you have highlighted, you know, porn, social media, the use of that, what that looks like. In terms of consent, we are putting on a documentary within 16 days. It's on the first Wednesday. Again, that has to be an over 18 because of the nature of what it looks like. And however, we are looking to get something similar to that put into the schools. And again, like once we roll out Equally Safe within the schools, I'm hoping, and I am hoping, that we'll have a better opportunity to widen the number of pupils that are accessing that on a daily basis, and how we can eradicate violence against women and girls within the schools.
Yeah, Councillor Forbes.
Councillor McCall's question led to the answer to what my question was going to be, but I had a second one, if you don't mind. And it's quite simple. When you talked a lot about perpetrators and you talked a lot about males, but I'm assuming that some violence against women and girls is conducted by women and girls. And if so, I mean, what's the kind of percentage?
Yeah, I can take that one. I don't actually have the percentage to hand, but there are absolutely perpetrators who are female, and obviously victims who are male. It's not all one way, but certainly the numbers are significantly lower where we have female perpetrators of domestic offending. I won't quote, but certainly that's something that we could provide you if you're wanting to know that information. But the majority of victims of domestic abuse are still female, and Jennifer, the other Jennifer, is key in that. All of the campaigns that we do are about raising awareness of it, raising awareness for other people to recognise the signs of it, but also raising awareness to people who are living in homes where their partner is potentially a domestic abuser. These campaigns all touch them, but certainly the number is significantly smaller when it's male to female, female to male ratio. But equally, we would deal with those incidents as we do any other domestic abuse incident, and that absolutely we will support any male victim, and ultimately we will seek to arrest any perpetrator of any offence.
Yeah, thanks for that. I maybe didn't ask the question in the way I should have done. So I think what I was trying to get at was that this is about violence against women and girls, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm assuming that in some cases there are women and girls who are violent towards women and girls. It wasn't about women and girls being violent towards men, because I know that's not what we're talking about today. So I think I was just seeking reassurance that if the perpetrator is a woman or a girl, they'll be treated the same way as if they were a man.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, same-sex relationships are not excluded from domestic abuse relationships or domestic abuse incidents. So yeah, we would treat them all the same where somebody has been a victim or somebody has been a perpetrator of offence, essentially in terms of ongoing support, and then any work to try and understand offending behaviour is key to the partnerships, and obviously raising awareness and preventing offending and making sure people are safe are the priorities regardless of the sex of victims or perpetrators.
So McCall, other questions?
I do, yes, thank you, convener. I think it was mentioned that the MARAC is meeting more frequently because there's been a higher level of activity. I'm just wondering how much of that is current activity and how much of it might be historical, because I know that there was quite a lot of work going on to try and encourage people to come forward, even if something was in the past.
Jennifer, I'm happy to answer that question.
Yes,
Jennifer
thank you.
will answer.
Yeah,
so all of the cases that are coming to MARAC obviously are about victims who are deemed to be at risk of harm. So that is current. So yes, there has been obviously an increase, and obviously the response to that is to have that meeting more frequently. But most of the cases that are discussed at MARAC are dealing with people who are in unsafe situations, and then what can we do to try and safeguard them. So most of the increase has probably been about current cases rather than historical ones.
So thank you for that clarification. And I'm just wondering, therefore, if the increase in current activity is because victims are more likely to come forward than they were before, or whether there's a genuine increase in activity being reported. You know, you mentioned the very first, I think, under reporting, and I know that's always been an ongoing issue.
It has. and it still is obviously under reporting, so we obviously don't know, and there will be people living who have never yet contacted services or the police. But absolutely, the data, I think, will come to your next meeting about obviously the performance in and around domestic offences, and obviously how we're responding and how we're detecting that. But essentially, when we've got an increase, we can try and delve into how we've got an increase. Is it because of all the campaigns and the success of that? And is it the confidence of people to come forward and engage with services, knowing that they're going to be listened to, and actually we will take it forward as investigations or give them the support that they need? So I suppose the positive in me likes to think that that's why we're getting an increase, or would explain any increase, is the fact that obviously victims feel confident to come forward. And ultimately, data recording has, over the years since we've become Police Scotland, been significantly improved. Certainly across our partnerships, we're all focused in and looking at how we are trying to measure our success, or areas where we need to improve. So maybe we're getting better at that as well, which would highlight obviously increases in any particular area. But I think it's recognised that domestic abuse continues to be a problem, despite all the good work that's happening. And the key to this is that we don't do it in isolation as the police or any of the partners, and that we need to continue to focus to work well together to make sure that we're sharing information and targeting those who commit offending, and ultimately try and keep people safe from further harm.
I think as well, Councillor McCall, I think again COVID was an example of how business models were adapted accordingly to, especially within our rural localities. That has demonstrated, for example, women who maybe wouldn't have come forward before, absolutely, because they have the reassurance that they now can get access to computers. They don't have to worry about how they can access services. So again, it's how the model has been designed differently now, and I think women are more confident. And again, as long as we're getting it right, people can feel more confident to report, and whether that's through a friend or through your neighbour, or again, people are picking up on issues more quickly, and we're confident that that's a good thing as well. We want women to feel confident enough to report in, but equally we want services to make sure we're mainstreaming it and aligning it that the woman is getting the best service that she deserves.
Thank you for that. That's given me some reassurance, because my own anecdotal knowledge is that women are much more likely to talk about it, that other women who are aware of situations of domestic abuse are more likely to talk about it, but also encourage victims to come forward. And so it's quite reassuring to hear from you that that's happening. So that's, I think, evidence of the fantastic job you're both doing. Thank you. Or all the services are doing. Thank you.
Councillor Leishman, thank you, Wilson.
Thanks very much, convener. Apart from ultimately desistance and not reoffending, how is progress and change in behaviours acknowledged and measured in programmes such as Caledonia? Do
you want to answer that, Jennifer? Or
obviously, police, our responsibility is the investigation of crime. I don't have any feedback out from Caledonia about desistance in terms of how they are measuring or continue to measure that. What I can say is that obviously when we have perpetrators who have been convicted of offending, and where there are statutory programmes in place through Caledonia or measures through the court, if people are then, I suppose, still deemed to present risk of harm or significant risk of harm, there is ongoing partnership work at that point to try and either monitor or prevent any further or repeat offending. So apologies, I don't have any data coming out of Caledonia, but like any other sort of programme that is about desistance, there will be successes in it, but equally there will be occasions where those perpetrators that have been through programme work will go on and obviously commit offences. I would like to think that that number is small.
Councillor Leishman, I would be happy to discuss that off table once we get the relevant figures in relation to that.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Karina. Thank you both, Jennifers, for the presentation. That was essential. It's essential work you do, difficult work, I'm sure, but it's essential. Just want to pick up on a point that Jennifer said at the beginning. You were a bit non-committal on numbers of men who abuse women. And I feel when something like this comes to the public eye, as it does, there's a tendency for the press or for the public to perceive all men as potential abusers. Without committing to numbers, would I be right in saying this is still a significant minority of men who abuse women? As the majority of men do have respect for women across the country. Would I be right in saying that?
Without numbers of obviously how many do and how many don't, because obviously we can't quantify how many don't, because that's potentially in that unreported spectrum. But essentially, any of our national campaigns, particularly That Guy and Don't Be a Bystander, is about trying to harness that power of peer pressure in and around people who won't stand by and watch other males offending. So it's about taking responsibility for your own actions, but also not standing by and watching the actions of other. And as Jennifer said, you know, the That Guy campaign has been particularly successful across Scotland, but also wider than that. And the plan is that that'll and will continue to be sort of an annual campaign to link in with the 16 days to try and raise awareness about domestic offending, whether it's male or female perpetrators, but equally to try and raise awareness about not watching or standing by when things happen and taking responsibility to act. So sorry, I've not really answered your question, but I don't actually have any figures in front of me. I came in focused on obviously trying to give you what we do day to day, rather than obviously the measure, which I know is important. But I suppose the measure of our success is how well we engage with our victims and how well they feel that they are dealt with through our services, and how we go on to continue to keep them safe.
Can I just come back? I appreciate no figures, but I mean, am I right in saying it's a minority of men, or am I looking through this in an old-fashioned way of looking at life? From your experience, your feeling on it.
Well, obviously my experience is about investigating domestic crime. So day to day, the majority of the incidents that we review are male perpetrators with female victims, but ultimately we only know what we know. And in my experience, obviously my personal experience, I would like to think that the male perpetrators of domestic violence are in the minority and not the majority of the public.
Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Councillor. Convener, sorry. It's just to clarify, my understanding is there's been a change in legislation in terms of corroboration around sort of sexual crimes, which I think is an important change to the law to help to bring offenders to justice. And obviously this is relatively new, but in terms of sort of getting that information out to some of the women that you support and deal with, is there anything you can sort of provide to the committee in terms of how that's been taken forward? Thank you.
No, so obviously internally, Police Scotland are looking at everything internally, given the outcome, which was actually only on the 18th of October. So that is obviously going to bring about some change, but I can't comment really any further other than that we're obviously aware of the outcome and obviously the significance that will have in terms of detecting and reporting sexual offences, and our public protection policy are looking at that in terms of how we are going to respond to that, and ultimately obviously what we need to do day to day to now bring that to the fore and move forward.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to comments now. So firstly we'll have quite quickly. Yes, Brian.
Thanks, convener. That was very, very much last minute there. Thank you. It's really one, I think, for a DCI Reid. Just curious as to how many staff is there in your domestic abuse team, and ultimately, do you have? Are you well enough staffed, or are you understaffed at the moment?
Like anything in policing, I don't think we're ever going to have sufficient resource to deal with what we've got. We obviously have a number of officers that are focused on investigation, and a number of officers within my department that are then focused on the safeguarding. I would happily have more resource, and everybody would continue to keep busy. I think, like everywhere at the moment, we are facing challenges in terms of capacity and demand, and we are, as Tom said, aligning and trying to realign so that we can continue to do and respond where we need to, which is obviously front-facing very much, so that we can continue to give people in Perth and Kinross the service that they deserve. So do I have enough? Probably not. Do I want more? Absolutely. But that could be said across a number of the teams that are under my portfolio, as could be said across any of the other child protection portfolios, local policing portfolios. There will never be a quiet day, I think, for police in terms of the calls that we get and response, and obviously resources that are key to trying to get engagement with the public and also keeping them safe.
Thanks very much. Thank you for that. Following on from that, I'm interested then in, it's obviously highly sensitive and very traumatic cases that you'll have to deal with. I'm just curious as to what sort of training staff or officers, I should say, would actually go through to then become part of your team.
Yeah, so obviously all the officers that come into specialist departments all start in uniform, police and response. So everybody that comes in brings their experience of frontline policing, and when they come into a department, there are bespoke specialist domestic abuse investigation courses, there are safeguarding courses. There's a whole host of training, and obviously, like I mentioned, the sexual offences liaison, that is also a 2-week specialist course. Everybody that's coming into specialist departments obviously wants to come to the department. We absolutely need people who want to work in this area, because as you've highlighted, it can be traumatic, and they're dealing with particularly serious offences, which can have an impact on their well-being, and clearly well-being of our officers is absolutely primary, and we have lots of opportunity for them to seek support if they need it. But training is almost all ongoing, day to day. Away from the specific courses, we then have continuous professional development, but obviously every time you deal with a new incident, probably everybody takes and learns something from that. We share learning with our partners, we learn from them, they learn from us, and internally we learn across different teams in different areas. My background is in child protection before I came into domestic abuse, and also in sex offender policing, and actually there's lots of learning to be brought from those areas into tackling domestic abuse and vice versa. So I think every day is learning, but the investigators specifically will get the police investigators programme, and then they get specialist training in and around domestic offending and sexual offending, and also safeguarding.
Councillor Barrett, for your comment.
Thanks, convener. And the first comment I was going to make has largely been made by the area commander in his comment in the chat. But I think that, like with the previous presentation, what we've heard today, I think serves to demonstrate the effectiveness of this particular partnership as well in the local work that we do to try and tackle violence against women and girls. And I know that work, and probably you do as well, convener, from your involvement nationally with COSLA executive boards, know that work is valued and respected at national level, and the contribution that Jennifer and her team make to the Equally Safe network is important and has been for a considerable length of time. And certainly they've helped me with responses to things like the Leslie Irvin report, in order to apply political pressure from local government to ensure that the Scottish Government treated it with sufficient urgency and importance, and not simply with nice warm words, but with an urgent response and with resource to match. And we've still to hear the outcomes of that, but certainly Jennifer's support in that has been really helpful. So I want to put that thanks on record. If there is anything, Jennifer, that we can do from the Equalities point of view with the Equalities Strategic Forum, maybe an avenue for you to present to, which would give access to the minority ethnic representative groups that we're regularly in contact, then please speak to me and to David McPhee, and we can get that set up, because I think that would be really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. I would really just endorse what Peter said. I think the work that's going on here is fantastic. I just want to actually address the question you asked, Councillor Braun, about the majority of men don't perpetrate violence against women and girls. And while that may well be true statistically, for women and girls, we just don't know who those people are. And we just need to look at the Sarah Everard case to see just how it could be anybody. And I think that's one of the ongoing issues that women and girls face all the time. And I know that from talking to my own nieces, that the risk to them is actually far greater than when I was younger, because there are other contributors at play, particularly out in social settings, where very often there are illegal substances applied to drinks and various other things that really weren't as prevalent as before. So in some ways it's become more dangerous to women and girls. So while I understand it's a very small minority, I think I would appeal to all of my male colleagues here to say you have to be aware that just because it's a small number, please don't assume therefore it doesn't apply to me, because I think it's everybody's responsibility to raise awareness, to ensure that if you see or are aware of behaviours that will lead to or are actually perpetrating violence against women and girls, that you call it out and you don't tolerate it and you don't put up with it. You don't just say, well, that's how it is. I'm not saying you do, Councillor Braun, obviously, but it's just a general comment, because there's very often that tendency to hide behind, well, it's just a small minority. But the impact of that small minority is significant, not just to the perpetrators or to the victims themselves, but any children involved, to wider family and to wider society. So that's just a comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted this topic as a single item on our agenda at some point, and when the day of action, 16 days of action happened last year, at that point I realised we'd missed an opportunity to have our committee last October, and I was definitely not going to miss the opportunity this time around to highlight this. I think we have a responsibility as councillors and as a committee to highlight the issues of violence against women and girls. The more society talks about it, the more we understand about it, the less uncomfortable we start to feel about talking about these things, then the better things will get going forward, because the knowledge and the understanding of what is appropriate and what isn't will be, if you try and watch any 1970s rom-com or sitcom movies, you will cringe at some of the things said and done, because it does not match what we accept in current society. A little story I'll have for you is myself, my brother and my nephew were punishing ourselves by going to watch Hibernian play Motherwell, in which heads got beat. But on the way there, we were travelling on a road just outside Broxburn and the Central Belt, and there was this young girl walking along the side of the road rather than on the opposite side that had a path that was next to quite a wooded and dense area. And my nephew commented, my nephew's 22, so he's not a young man, and he commented, why is she walking on that side? And my brother, who's now a retired retired inspector for the police and myself, realised the girl felt more safe walking on the side of the road where it was all open rather than on the path next to the bushes. And I think what we have to realise is that women and girls go through life fearing different things that men and boys do. The risk to them and the risk that they feel are different, and we need to understand this. And I think as a committee, the presentation that we've done today, I hope help highlight and move these issues forward. And that was the reason I want these things to come. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions. Jennifer, you were brilliant. There's no need to be nervous. And thank you, Jennifer, Reid, as well, for your input. Thank you. We'll move on to our final item on the agenda, item 7. Prior to this item, we have one of our long-standing tenants. So with us, Ms. Lynn Palmer, who is on one of our tenant panels and has been for many years, and is a very positive advocate towards our tenants having input into our housing services. So we'll give her time if she wants to. If you come and sit across the table, so there's a microphone, Ms. Palmer. If you do have any questions on this next paper, then if you, we'll accept that when the time is appropriate, because that's why you're here. So that's good. Thank you very much. So can I have Elaine Ritchie, the Senior Service Manager, to introduce this report, please?
Thanks, Convener. As some members are aware, in order to comply with the Scottish Housing Regulatory Framework, the Council must approve and submit an annual assurance statement, giving assurance that it's meeting legislative regulatory standards for social housing in Scotland. This is the 4th year that landlords have been required to publish an annual assurance statement. The service has a range of self-assessment and quality assurance monitoring arrangements in place to ensure the continued delivery of high-quality services. We also have well-established methods in place to seek feedback from tenants through complaints, tenant satisfaction arrangements, but also through our scrutiny work. Appendix 1 to the report provides an awareness of some of the information that supports the statement. Committee will note that 3 of our 6,583, which is 0.04% gas safety checks, were not completed by the anniversary date. 2 checks were delayed due to tenants self-isolating and allowing no access, and 1 due to a miscommunication. Due to new legislation introduced, we were also non-compliant with regards to not having an electrical inspection certificate report, EICR, for 159 properties and upgraded smoke detection equipment in 9 properties. These failures represented 2% of properties without a valid EICR and 0.1% of properties without upgraded smoke detection equipment at a total property portfolio of 7,960 properties. The above non-compliance is largely due to labour shortages and capacity within the electrical industry and the ongoing reluctance of some tenants to grant access to their property to allow testing to be completed or equipment installed. However, the health, safety and well-being, along with the wishes of our tenants, has continued to be our priority, and we've continued to follow national guidance in respect of these activities. I'm pleased to advise that we've made significant progress to achieving full compliance in both areas. I can therefore advise committee that during 22-23, Perth and Kinross Housing Service complied with all except 3 regulatory requirements. However, I'm confident we have achieved all of our standards and outcomes of the Scottish Social Housing Charter for tenants, people who are homeless, and for others who use our service within our legal obligations relating to housing, homelessness, equalities, human rights, and tenant and resident safety. Finally, throughout the year, the committee has received several key reports providing assurance that we are delivering and exceeding the standards required by the SHR, as outlined in Appendix 1 of the report, and that the housing service continues to deliver high service with strong performance across all areas and ongoing high levels of tenant satisfaction despite the ongoing challenges faced. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for this report? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener, and thank you, Elaine, for the report. Just going back a little bit to paragraph 5.5, you mentioned about the three gas checks. It says it's been addressed, but just could we confirm they have been done? And secondly, on the next paragraph 5.6 about the EICR, And the smoke detection equipment, do we have an update on how many numbers have now been done?
Yeah, we've made significant progress. So for our EICRs, we only have 57 properties outstanding. However, they're all void. They're not fully tenanted, and that's why they've not been completed, because we'll complete them as part of the refurbishment programme. And in terms of the gas smoke detector installation, same, 3 properties, but they're all 3 empty properties waiting refurbishment. So there's no tenanted properties without a valid EICR or gas safety.
Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, convener. This is my first time as a full-time member of this committee, so I apologise if I'm asking questions that everyone else in the room knows the answer to. And can I just thank Elaine for the time she spent with me on Monday? I think I took up 2 hours of her time and asked her probably 100 more questions than she was expecting to get, so I'm grateful for that. My interest is in section 8.5, and I see the overall satisfaction has just dropped very slightly, and I'm wondering if that may be because we've used an outside agency to conduct the surveys on our behalf, given that I know some of the responses that came back were not at all related to housing, and in fact were other areas of the council.
Yes, Councillor Forbes, that's correct. We changed our method. We used an external company called the Knowledge Partnership, an external company to undertake our tenant satisfaction survey, and that's the reason for the change. And we also changed it from a yearly survey. It used to be a 3-year survey as well, and some of the questions that we asked. So we did a mix between telephone and face-to-face questions in terms of answers. So yes, it has been a change. And there was over 1,190 tenants that we surveyed, so quite a lot in comparison to other local authorities, because I've done quite analysis on our tenant satisfaction to look at how we can improve it. So there's quite a lot of variables within that.
Thank you very much, and well done, Elaine, and the whole team for such a good performance. My question, Elaine, is around on clause 5.7 about the ongoing reluctance of some tenants to grant access to the property. And I'm just wondering what the root causes are behind that, or if we know, or if there's the same people again. And given the previous agenda item, I'm just wondering if there's many women who women tenants who perhaps live alone who are reluctant to allow some people to enter their property. Thank you.
There's quite a lot of factors of reluctance. Some people just don't communicate with us, others are ashamed of their condition of their property, others have got mental health and wellbeing issues. However, just give you a reassurance, we put a lot of measures in place in terms of trying to get access to the property. We can force access, we have the right to do that as a landlord, but that is last resort. We don't want to do that because that has an impact on our working relationship with our tenants. So there is a variety of reasons that tenants don't allow that, but as you can see, we've managed to gain quite a lot of access to make sure we are compliant. So it's working on a person-centred base, trying every route that we can, providing various information through all our social media channels, and just constantly being at the tenant until we can get the access to the property.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, convener. My question is in relation to paragraph 6.2, which is at the top of page 16 in our papers, where it talks about our approach to responding to mould, damp and condensation, and goes on to talk about investment in new technology through the Internet of Things, which allow us to monitor properties. I wondered if we could get a wee bit more details as to how that works, please, and perhaps an idea of what percentage of our housing stock do suffer with damp and condensation problems. Thank you.
I was going to get a question on that, Councillor Duff, so I've come prepared. Just roughly about 312 properties suffer from mould, damp or condensation issues. So it's roughly about 20% of our properties. And given the terrible case down in England, we've put a robust framework in place. And we did an elected members briefing not that long ago, and we've just updated it, and hopefully that should be out by the end of this week, just giving an update on our position regarding mould and damp work. But to give you a wee bit of reassurance, we do a lot of work regarding that. We've currently dealt with 300 320 cases, but current live cases, we've got about 30, and they're spread within our localities. And they vary in terms of what we would do in terms of prevention. Sometimes it is tenants' behaviour, but sometimes it is property related. And we work really hard to try and address that. And we also just don't address it once. We put a flag on the system and go back and check to make sure that we've got the right solution for our tenants. And it is an area that we're totally focused on. And other local authorities are looking at our approach, given quite a lot of the work that we've done there. In terms of the Internet of Things, that is a project that we've rolled out where we've installed sensors within quite a lot of our properties. In terms of to date, we've installed, and within 140 properties, we've installed 282 sensors, and they detect moisture and condensation. And it's a traffic light system that we use through the Wi-Fi, so we're able to pick up indications when properties go red. That means there's a condensation or mould issue in that property, and we're able to send staff out to order to speak to the tenant to find out why that is. And often it is because they've not got money in their meter to put their heating on, and they're having difficulties in terms of using their windows, in terms of the trickle vent. So it's a range of information and advice, but it's about being proactive and responding to the issue. And we want to roll out that Internet of Things as we go forward. That's only a handful of properties that we've got, but we've got really good feedback so far, and we want to continue to use that approach.
Thanks. That's very interesting. Just in relation, I mean, the 20% of our property seems to be quite high, I would have to say, in terms of my perception. But is that an improving situation or a worsening one?
The 20% I don't think is right. I think I've copied and pasted wrong. No, it has. It is. We've seen a spike, a slight increase, but that's because we've been really proactive. So we've looked back. It's not as because it's a greater problem. It's just because we've made this a major focus within the service in terms of mould, damp and condensation. So to say it is a major issue, I'd be reluctant to say that. It's because we've done quite a lot of staff training, awareness, early identification, not just within the housing, but also within our key partners. So when other partners, such as social work or education colleagues, are visiting, we're asking them to identify any issues as well. But following today's committee, I can make sure that briefing in terms of the number is recirculated just to confirm the current position, Councillor Duff. Apologies for that.
No, thanks very much. I'm glad that was cleared up, but I'll wait the briefing note. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. It's just actually a follow-on from the previous question regarding the mould and damp. And it obviously appears that the council is, responding to that very well, demonstrated in the fact that we're providing master classes to other local authorities on our approach. I was just curious to know, like, how many local authorities have we been providing that to, and actually can you identify any of them? Thank you.
So it was actually to quite a lot of local authorities. So as part of the housing services within all local authorities, we're part of it's called a LATRO, Association of Local Chief Housing Officers, and this is where we've discussed the mould and damp issue, and they put an invite out to all the housing services within Scotland to come along, and I was asked to deliver a presentation to all those local authorities. And then following that presentation, I've had quite a lot of follow-ups from individual local authorities just looking for the nitty-gritty details in terms of copy of our procedures and risk assessments and those sorts of things. So it's from your Lanarkshires through to Stirling to Falkirk. It's been quite a range of local authorities.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Tom. I just wondered, Elaine, if you could tell us how we're approaching EICRs for the future. I think we have to do a mandatory EICR every 5 years. Presumably we're not going to wait 5 years and then do 8,000 in the winter again and have the problems of finding enough electricians to do it. So even if it means that some are going to be recertified within a period of a year, are we going to be doing it on a kind of annual programme basis?
You've just answered your own question. We've got a rolling programme, so we've put a contractor in place and we've made it batches as well. So we're making sure we're being proactive this time so we don't have a backlog, but also to help with the forced access, no access issues as well with our EICR. So it's a contract in place that we've got for the next 5 years, and we're starting to see 5 years starting to end already. So we're trying to be proactive to get them scheduled in already. So it is a programme that we've got in place.
Councillor Forbes.
Thanks for that. I'm going to take you, Elaine, sorry, back to mould and damp, but I was interested in particular in the sensors. I think you did answer the question earlier on, but these sensors, they only monitor dampness levels in the house. They don't monitor anything else, and therefore there's no infringement on privacy or anything like that.
That's correct, Councillor Forbes. Just dampness, condensation. They're just sensors in terms of the environment. It's not, we don't hear people talking and things like that. It's just in terms of condensation. And there's IT have supported us with this project, so they've been heavily involved in terms of data protection and disclaimers and things like that, because we have to be really careful with that.
Can I just follow up? I take it we have to get, and we presumably do get permission from the tenants to put them in, and people could say, no, I don't want it in my house, and we'd have to accept that. Is that the case?
So because it was a pilot, our IT department managed to get some European funding, and what we did was we went out to our tenants and said who would like to have these sensors in the properties. We also targeted properties where we'd known there had been previous issues. So we actually had more tenants than what we had sensors. But going forward, if we are looking to roll the programme out, we would need to get the consent of the tenant to install it, yes.
They're in various property types as well, just to give us a much rounder picture.
So they're in our multi-stories, and that will inform our multi-story strategy. We can get grant funding, but we have to have evidence, and we're using the sensors to give us that evidence so we can gain grant funding. So it's in a variety of tenancies and properties, because it's not one solution fits everything. We need to have a variety of tools in our toolkit to respond effectively to the mould and damp.
Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Convener. It's just to draw members' attention. There was an excellent update on condensation, mould and growth sent out by Elaine in October 2023 as an elected members' briefing, as I say, and I think the figures are detailed in that briefing note. So we'll try and put that on the chat just to clarify that. Thank you.
Councillor Braun, do you have another question?
Yeah, just a very quick question, Convener. Going to paragraph 84, the survey result, 14.9% response. Is that better or worse than previous surveys?
Just trying to get it's actually a reduction compared to last year. Yeah. If you hold on, I can actually get you the figures. So last year it was 82.2%. So we went down to 78.
No, sorry, I was talking about the actual response from the tenants. We got 14.9% response. Is that better or worse than previous years?
Sorry, that was an increase. Sorry, apologies. I thought you meant the percentage. I wasn't listening. Apologies, Councillor Braun.
Right, I see I have no more questions, so I will move the paper. This report notes the requirement of the Council to submit and approve an annual assurance statement which provides assurances that the housing service is meeting legislative and regulatory standards for social housing in Scotland. This report provides a brief overview of the framework and appends the 2022-23 annual assurance statement. During 22-23, Perth and Kinross Housing Service complied with all but 3 regulatory requirements as set out in Chapter 3 of the Scottish Housing Regulators Framework. I am pleased to hear of the significant progress made by the service to achieve full compliance with the 3 requirements. Appendix 1 of the report details an overview of information that supports the annual assurance statement and the evidence required by the Scottish Housing Regulator, which is supported by the well-established mechanism in place to seek feedback from tenants through complaints, tenant satisfaction arrangements, but also through the scrutiny work carried out by tenants. As noted, the Council Housing Service continues to deliver strong performance across all areas of the service. This performance, along with the high levels of tenant satisfaction, provides assurances that the service is delivering good outcomes and services for their tenants and people that use the service, and in line with the guidance of the Scottish Housing Regulators published regulatory framework. I move the report and ask the committee to approve the recommendations as outlined in 2.1. Can I ask Councillor McCall to second the report, please?
Happy to second the report, thank you.
Do members have any comments? Ms. Palmer.
Oh, I was just wanting to say that the annual assurance statement seems fine. The fact that the details which Elaine has just given us regarding what tasks have not been done yet shows that the statement is open and honest, and that's very important. So that's all I had to say this morning, really. But with regard to the damp thing, there was a flyer. Maybe the flyer could be kept going, or maybe it could be online. Maybe it is online. I don't know.
I think we take every opportunity we can with the flyer you mentioned. It's also within the Housing magazine that we produced. I think one of the pages has it published on that as well. And if anybody comes to any of our engagement sessions, again, these are opportunities for us to engage with tenants on all these type of issues, not just the say the rent setting or whatever the engagement is for. But thank you very much for your input.
Okay.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Are there any other comments from councillors? Well, thank you very much. That concludes our meeting for today. Thank you for attending today and contributing. I thought it was a very, very positive meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.